Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Taylor Wright. Taylor Wright was born on April 23, 1988. Friends and family described her as energetic and full of life. She was kind and empathetic, spending most of her life in North Carolina as she pursued her American dream. Taylor married Jeff Wright and later had a son named Drake. She earned a college degree and worked as an officer at the local police station, where she solved numerous crimes and was respected. To the outside world, Taylor's life seemed perfect. She had a loving husband, a son, and a respected job. However, the reality was that not everything in her life was as idyllic as it appeared. Taylor's close friends knew that she smoked marijuana occasionally, but she kept it a secret. During her time in the police force, she used it to manage stress and her heavy workload. She claimed that she didn't smoke regularly, only occasionally to relax after a long day. However, Jeff found out about her secret and left with her son after their divorce. This made Taylor realize that she needed to change her life. In 2016, Taylor decided to start over and moved to Pensacola, Florida, a small resort town with a population of about 52,000. She likes the warm, comfortable atmosphere here. After quitting her job, she began working as a private investigator. Armed with the knowledge and experience from her previous job, she was eager to apply her skills to help her clients. Taylor divorced her husband, but faced two major challenges: child custody and financial issues. Court proceedings to divide assets and child custody were ongoing. It was a complicated divorce, and despite her efforts to reach an agreement, they were unable to reach an agreement, which dragged on. In September 2017, frustrated by financial disputes, Taylor withdrew money from her bank account without telling Jeff. The money, which was her personal savings, was something she did not want to share with Jeff. After withdrawing the money, she gave it to a friend to keep. One of Taylor's friends, Ashley MacArthur, is the main character in this story. Taylor has known Ashley, a forensic scientist, for over a year. Although it was a relatively short period of time, they became very close, to the point where Taylor entrusted Ashley with a large sum of money. Ashley agreed to help and was supposed to deposit the money in a safe deposit box, keeping it a secret from Jeff until Taylor was ready to use it. However, she soon needed money to pay for a lawyer. When Taylor reached out to Ashley, she noticed that Ashley always had excuses for delaying the return of the money or only giving her small amounts. Ashley claimed she was having trouble withdrawing the funds or that there were issues with the bank. During this time, Taylor grew increasingly suspicious that something was wrong and worried that her money might have been spent. Despite Taylor's persistent requests for the full amount to be returned, Ashley continued to provide various excuses. On the evening of September 7, 2017, Taylor and her friend Cassandra Waller went out to dinner. Cassandra had quickly become close friends after Taylor moved to the area. Cassandra was new to the city and Taylor suggested they rent an apartment together. Cassandra, a kind teacher, agreed. Over time, they developed a strong friendship. During dinner, Taylor shared her financial concerns, especially about her friend Ashley, who she believed was intentionally delaying repayment of money. Taylor expressed concern that Ashley might have spent the money or not want to pay it back. This made Taylor very anxious and stressed because she desperately needed the money to hire a good lawyer. That evening, Cassandra comforted Taylor, reassuring her that the matter would eventually be resolved, although she also had doubts about whether the money was still there. Taylor mentioned that she had scheduled a meeting with Ashley the next day, September 8th, to go to the bank together. On the morning of September 8th, as Cassandra was getting ready for work, she said goodbye to Taylor. And on her way out of the house, she saw Ashley's sitting car in the driveway. They were finally ready to take care of their banking issues. The girls said goodbye, and Cassandra drove off to school. Later that day, Ashley called Cassandra to inform her that she and Taylor had decided not to go to the bank, opting instead to go to the farm. This confused Cassandra, as she knew Taylor was in dire need of money. The night before, Taylor had been very stressed and emotional at dinner, eager to get her financial situation sorted out. Ashley explained that she and Taylor had been discussing Taylor's struggles. Ashley suggested that horseback riding might help Taylor improve spirit, therefore them to cancel their bank trip and plan an alternative vacation. This explanation seemed strange to Cassandra, but she wished them luck anyway. However, after the call, Cassandra attempted to contact Taylor but received no response to her calls or messages. Later on, Cassandra received a text from Taylor, who said she couldn't talk at the moment but would call back later. Taylor explained that she was feeling uncertain and depressed due to her divorce and the changes in her life, and that she was going out of town for a few days. Cassandra believed her and decided to give her friend some space. A couple of days later, Cassandra reached out again, asking Taylor to return home as soon as she could. After that, she received no response. As the days passed, Cassandra tried to contact Taylor several times, but Taylor continued to ignore her calls and texts, even though some of the messages were marked as read. Taylor did not return home, and all of her belongings were still intact, which made Cassandra increasingly worried about her friend's safety. Cassandra wanted to see Taylor to make sure she was okay. Their neighbor said that Taylor had used drugs in the past and that she could become withdrawn during difficult times. With the difficulties Taylor was having, Cassandra was worried that she might relapse. Cassandra was feeling anxious. A week had gone by with no news, and waiting seemed pointless. Concerned, her reached out to the police. She told the officers that something was off, as Taylor was behaving unusually and had completely disappeared without explanation. In their shared apartment, there were numerous personal items belonging to Taylor that she would have taken if she had moved. There was no valid reason for her to ignore her friend's calls. Until now, Taylor had never done anything like this. After hearing Cassandra's story, the police took note of the unusual aspects of the case. The police focused on the time frame of her disappearance. Naturally, they interviewed Cassandra first, since she lived in the same house as Taylor and had a close relationship with her. Meanwhile, searches were conducted in the apartment that Cassandra shared with Taylor. In the apartment, the police found Taylor's identification, some cash, and an unloaded revolver. Cassandra explained that they kept weapons in the house for self-defense, but they had never used them. There was nothing else suspicious found, but it was evident that Taylor could not have left for an extended period without her documents, money, and belongings. Cassandra was questioned several times, and she quickly felt that the police suspected her and shifted their focus to proving her innocence. Despite this, she continued to cooperate with the investigation because she wanted to find out the truth. Eventually, she was ruled out as a suspect. Police initially focused on Jeff, given their contentious divorce, which involved the division of assets and custody of their son. Jeff certainly had a strong motive to harm Taylor, but police quickly determined that he was in North Carolina at the time of her disappearance and had not left the city. He had recently remarried and was focused on building a new life, with little regard for his ex-wife. Family members confirmed that despite their divorce, Jeff and Taylor remained on good terms for the sake of their 6-year-old son. Jeff was known to be non-confrontational and had never harmed Taylor. He was not even aware that she had withdrawn money and tried to conceal it. Therefore, there was no reason for him to be angry with her, prompting police to immediately eliminate him as a potential suspect. The police then decide to talk to Ashley, whom Cassandra had mentioned. Her behavior is very unusual. They bring her in for questioning, and the police quickly notice that she is even flirting with the police, which shows that she is not at all concerned about her friend's disappearance. Ashley seems to believe that Taylor is okay. She knows that Taylor has been addicted to marijuana in the past and thinks that Taylor is not really missing but is simply indulging her addiction. Ashley speculates that after receiving some money, Taylor relapsed and went off to use. However, this explanation seems unconvincing because Ashley had previously told Cassandra about the trip to the farm, but she didn't mention that. Only when the police press her does Ashley reveal that they went to the farm because Taylor wanted to relax. During the trip, Taylor confided in her about the stress she was under from the divorce proceedings, which had affected her mental health. After some time, Taylor expressed that she was tired and wanted to go home. She called an Uber and left. Ashley reported that she hadn't seen or heard from Taylor, despite making several attempts to call her. The police were aware of a money issue that Ashley was supposed to resolve but was avoiding, leading them to suspect she was hiding something. Suddenly, Ashley started mentioning a safe deposit box and money, claiming she had no knowledge of the funds being talked about. At this point, the police were confused as there was no clear information regarding the money. Police then decided to look into text messages between her and Taylor. They discovered numerous discussions about money, with Ashley frequently postponing meetings and transferring money. In the text messages, they talked about going to the bank on September 8th to withdraw money. Police requested footage from cameras near Taylor's home. After reviewing the videos, they found the women near Taylor's apartment, which matched Cassandra's earlier account. Ashley was in a car in front of the house when Cassandra left. Taylor then left the house and left with Ashley. Using geolocation, police tracked Taylor and Ashley's movements. Police reviewed surveillance footage from across the city and saw them buying beer and food, which appeared to be normal. However, no further information about their whereabouts was available after that. Inconsistencies began to appear between Ashley's testimony. However, the police decided to release her because they did not have enough evidence against her at that time. After that, Ashley contacted the police station almost daily to check on the progress of the investigation and to see if they had any new information. She wanted to help and often recounted the details of that day, as well as places where Taylor might have gone. During the conversation, she suggested that police should search alleys and talk to people who are selling illegal substances. She believed that Taylor was simply depressed and using drugs uncontrollably, and she repeatedly urged the police to follow up on this lead. She also talked about some suspicious suspects that she had seen with Taylor. Despite Ashley's best efforts to appear concerned, but police are still investigating her connection to Taylor's disappearance. Video evidence shows that Ashley visited the bank after Taylor went missing. During that visit, she withdrew money from Taylor's card. Police are particularly concerned about any potential conflict between Ashley and Taylor. Ashley had a strong motive for her actions, the $34,000 in question. It is suspected that she deliberately delayed her response because she did not want to return the money. Fearing that Taylor might report this to the police, Ashley may have decided to eliminate her friend. With Taylor missing for such a long time, there are concerns that she is no longer alive, but this needs to be confirmed. Ashley had a significant advantage. She worked for the police department and was married to a former deputy chief of the Battery Falcons. This created a difficult situation for the officers, who could not be sure of their safety while investigating her. As a result, they chose to keep the investigation secret. In October, Ashley was called in for questioning again. As the case progressed, documentary and circumstantial evidence accumulated that linked her to Taylor's disappearance. The police noticed a marked change in Ashley's behavior. She went from being outgoing and flirtatious to being withdrawn and clearly anxious. By this time, the police had verified that most of her previous statements were lies. They presented her with clear contradictions in her testimony and began investigating the cashing of hidden checks, which were likely to have forged signatures. At the very least, this could lead to accusations of fraud, but there could be darker motives behind these actions. Ashley initially claimed that she and Taylor had gone to East Milton, where they allegedly spent the day at a farm with animals. They were last seen on surveillance footage at 11:45 a.m., which was the only footage of Taylor alive during her initial interview. She was recorded on surveillance cameras in various locations throughout the day, but she was seen alone. As the police continued to talk to Ashley, she became increasingly nervous. Her answers became more confused, and she struggled to explain the discrepancies in her story. The police obtained a search warrant for the farmhouse but found no evidence in the large area. They then asked about the checks to determine if they were indeed counterfeit. If the checks were genuine, that would mean that Taylor was still alive when Ashley went to the bank, but Ashley could not give a clear answer. She just said that the checks could be real. While examining the geolocation data on Ashley's cell phone, police discovered that she had been staying at Britt Road for an extended period of time. This was another farm owned by her family. In fact, they had been there for several hours before Taylor disappeared. Ashley again confirmed that Taylor was going to buy a truck from a dealership. But this time, she added new details to the story. She said that Taylor was going back to the farm. Ashley had not mentioned these details in her earlier statements, claiming that Taylor had asked her to keep the incident private. Ashley believed that Taylor was still alive and would come back, so she did not want to harm her reputation in front of the police. However, she lied multiple times, leading the police to lose trust in her. The police were very interested in the Ashley family farm in Britt Road. It was a large, isolated area that would have been a fit place to commit the crime and cover it up. During their questioning, the police noted another strange aspect of Ashley's behavior: why she did not contact the police immediately when Taylor promised to return but did not show up. It was clear that Taylor was in trouble and needed help. Although Ashley tried to show concern to the police, she made no effort to find Taylor. Why did she wait until she was called in for questioning to show concern? These questions remain unanswered, but the police believe that Ashley was withholding important information. After her trip to the farm with Taylor, Ashley frequently called the police station to check on the investigation into her friend's disappearance, especially after her initial interview. She was anxious to know if she was being considered a suspect. After her conversation with the police, Ashley realized that she was the prime suspect in the case. She decided to ask for a lawyer, which ended her visit to the police station. On the morning of October 19, 2017, Ashley returned home. That afternoon, police obtained a search warrant for the farm where she and Taylor had been staying. Specially trained dogs were deployed in the search, and within 2 hours, they discovered a suspicious burial site. It was a small pit that appeared to have been recently dug and had been covered with concrete. A human skull was found in a shallow grave, along with other remains that had been hastily buried in the dirt and construction debris. The victim died from a gunshot wound to the head. Due to the advanced state of decomposition, the body could not be identified at the scene. However, based on clothing and jewelry, it is believed that it was Taylor. An autopsy confirmed that the body was Taylor Wright, 30. The identification was completed using dental records and DNA analysis. Ashley was arrested that evening, October 19, 2018, and charged with premeditated murder. Ashley's defense attorney believed in her innocence, but the abundance of circumstantial evidence made it challenging to convince the jury of her non-involvement in the crime. The attorney focused on Ashley's psychological profile, portraying her as sweet, pretty, and a police officer, which seemed inconsistent with being a violent criminal. Friends and family described Ashley as quiet, modest, and incapable of murder, especially when considering her physical attributes. In contrast, Taylor was physically stronger, leading the prosecution to question the defense's arguments. The lawyer developed his strategy based on the fact that the police lacked direct evidence to prove Ashley's guilt. There was no murder weapon, no witnesses, and no DNA linking Ashley to the body. This made it difficult for the prosecutor's office to connect Ashley to the crime. One witness was the victim's ex-husband, Jeff. He stated that he reached out to Ashley a few days after his Taylor went missing, trying to locate her to address some matters related to their marriage and divorce. Jeff contacted Ashley via social media. She claimed that the last time she saw Taylor was when she was exchanging money. She expressed concern about whether Taylor had arrived safely. This was a new detail that Ashley had never mentioned before, leading the police to realize that she was a pathological liar who had deceived everyone around her. Although Jeff was initially investigated and cleared as a suspect due to a solid alibi, he still had a strong motive. The lawyer attempted to redirect the jury's attention to Jeff's possible involvement in his ex-wife's murder. But these efforts were unsuccessful. The testimonies from Ashley's close friends greatly influenced the jury. They revealed that the Ashley was not as she seemed. She frequently visited a strip club. Bartenders and staff stated that just before Taylor went missing, Ashley spoke negatively about Taylor. Later, a gun associated with Taylor's death was discovered in Ashley's house. After new evidence emerged, the Ashley admitted to spiking Taylor's beer with a strong substance. However, when Taylor took a sip, she noticed the drink tasted odd and clearly spoiled. She spat it out and refused to drink any more, which likely led to the failure of Ashley's poisoning plan. Despite this admission, Ashley denied any involvement in the shooting of her friend. The prosecution argued that she had a strong motive. Ashley was holding on to a large sum of Taylor's money and was delaying returning it. Taylor desperately needed the money to pay her lawyer, so if Ashley delayed paying, Taylor would likely report the matter to the police. This situation gave Ashley a motive to get rid of her friend. The police later discovered the reason for the delay in returning the money. Ashley had been secretly having an affair with a man named Brandon, without her husband's knowledge. It was revealed that she had spent all of the money on Brandon, including giving him a motorcycle just weeks before Taylor went missing. This coincided with the time she had received money from Taylor. In court, Brandon admitted that Ashley had frequently given him expensive gifts, but he did not know where she got the money, as she had no other source for such a large sum of money. The police tracked Ashley's movements and discovered that she had gone to Home Depot after Taylor went missing. The police spoke to a sales clerk who confirmed that Ashley had purchased several bags of quick-drying solution. When the substance found in Taylor's grave was tested, it matched the quick-drying compound mentioned by the hardware store employee. This suggests that Ashley attempted to quickly hide Taylor's body on the farm to avoid detection. However, Ashley's attorney argued that she was not physically able to carry the heavy bags, dig the grave, and move Taylor's body. The jury then deliberated for about 4 hours and found Ashley MacArthur guilty of first-degree murder. She was sentenced to life in prison, eligible for parole after 25 years. She also served an additional 7 years for fraud related to Taylor Wright's finances. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery, the case of Michelle Hadley. Michelle Hadley was born on December 20, 1986, in Upland, California. She is the eldest daughter of a business family and was raised in a strict, conservative family. Michelle grew up with a younger sister and had a close relationship with her parents. During her school years, Michelle led a relatively normal life. Michelle's friends describe her as polite and kind, with a straightforward personality who always says what she thinks. Whenever there are disagreements, she tries to resolve them. Michelle was diligent from a young age, consistently completing her tasks and responsibilities. During her high school years, she was in a long-term relationship with a boyfriend. The couple were together for many years and finally decided to get married in 2008. However, she soon discovered that marriage did not bring her the happiness she had hoped for. After 4 years, the couple's relationship began to deteriorate, and they eventually decided to divorce. In 2013, Michelle's life took a turn for the better when she met Ian Diaz, who was 9 years her. For Michelle, the relationship felt like destiny. Ian was a U.S. Marshal, and Michelle worked in marketing. Initially seemed well suited to each other. The two met through an online dating site, and after a whirlwind romance, they decided to move in together by the fall of 2014. Ian proposed to Michelle, and they started making wedding plans. Initially, their marriage seemed perfect. However, Ian's true nature slowly began to emerge. At first, Michelle didn't notice the changes in Ian's behavior and attributed his actions to caring personality. As time went on, Ian's personality changed for the worse. He became more destructive to himself and emotionally hurtful to Michelle, causing her to be shocked, devastated, and extremely confused. Michelle came from a conservative family, and Ian would sometimes ask her to wear revealing clothes that made her feel uncomfortable. Despite her reservations, Michelle went along with her husband's requests, thinking he was just trying to spice up their relationship. However, Ian noticed that she gave in easily and began making even more daring requests. Eventually, Ian asked Michelle to get her belly button pierced, a request she was initially hesitant about, but ultimately agreed to. However, Ian increasingly pushed the limits. His requests began to become more and more strange. He asked Michelle to quit her marketing job and work at Disneyland, a place he loved and had previously worked at as a deputy U.S. Marshal. Perhaps Ian wanted to keep an eye on his wife, and working somewhere where he still had a relationship made sense to him. Ian justified his suggestion by saying he wanted Michelle to be safer, but in reality, he was seeking greater control over her life. Initially, Michelle found the request peculiar, but driven by her love for her husband and her desire to please she agreed. However, as time passed, Michelle began to feel uneasy about the arrangement. She found herself becoming a different person, one that she no longer recognized. She then confided in her husband. But instead of listening to her, he became angry and violent. Afterward, Michelle and Ian decided to purchase a condominium together, hoping that owning a home would strengthen their bond. This decision was made about 2 years after they first met. The couple began their search for a condo in 2015 and eventually found one they liked in downtown Anaheim, although it was slightly more expensive than they had budgeted for, at $470,000. At the time of the purchase, Michelle had no idea that Ian didn't plan to contribute to the mortgage payments. When the first payment was due, Ian claimed he was experiencing financial difficulties, but he assured Michelle that he would pay the next month's installment. She proceeded with the $144,000 down payment. She handled the paperwork and finalized the purchase, thinking everything was in order. However, in retrospect, it was clear that their relationship was already deteriorating. The situation worsened after they bought the condo. Although the deed had both of their names on it, it became evident that Ian wanted the condo for himself, while Michelle was the only one shouldering the mortgage payments. One summer evening in 2015, Michelle and Ian got into a violent altercation in the car. Ian physically attacked Michelle, causing minor injuries. In the aftermath, Michelle composed a distressing email to her sister detailing the events, but unfortunately never sent it. As the summer drew to a close, nearly 2 months after purchasing their condo, Michelle decided to leave Ian and move in with her parents. Despite no longer living in the condo, Michelle was still responsible for paying the mortgage. This decision would later become a contentious issue in their relationship. In fact, Ian continued to skip the mortgage payments, infuriating Michelle. Around this time, Michelle had stepped down from her high-paying job and was working at Disneyland, a position she disliked. Furthermore, her new job paid significantly less than her previous one. In an attempt to address the mortgage issue amicably, Michelle reached out to Ian via email, phone calls, and texts. However, he deliberately ignored her messages, which escalated the situation. The tension between them reached a boiling point, prompting Michelle to confront Ian in person. Ian's answer was shocking. He never planned to pay the mortgage, which made Michelle furious. Michelle found herself in a difficult situation and decided to take action. She emailed Ian, warning him that his behavior would have serious consequences if he continued. However, this email only made Ian angrier, and he responded by filing a restraining order against Michelle. The police did not fully support Ian's request, as they determined he shared some blame in the matter. When Michelle discovered Ian's request to obtain a restraining order, she countered by pointing out his failure to pay the mortgage on their jointly owned condominium. To resolve the issue, they agreed to hire property lawyers and eventually came to a settlement. The court ruling ultimately favored Michelle, ordering Ian to pay the outstanding mortgage balance. If Ian failed to comply, he would face an additional penalty. Although the ruling was unfavorable for Ian, he had no choice but to abide by the court's decision. This situation dragged on for a year, and by 2016, Michelle and Ian had officially separated. This marked a new beginning for Michelle, freeing her from a toxic relationship. In contrast, Ian remained bitter about the outcome, continuing to live in the condo and pay the mortgage. Ian's life had become increasingly complicated due to the condo situation, so he decided to start using dating apps again to try to move on. This was how he met Angela Connell, a woman he thought was perfect for him. Angela was born in 1985 in Phoenix, Arizona. She attended a Catholic high school and later graduated from Arizona State University in 2006. Ian and Angela met in January 2016. And they immediately have feelings for each other. Their relationship progressed quickly. Ian proposed within a month, and soon Angela moved into his condo. It seemed as if they were meant to be together. By May 2016, Angela announced she was expecting twins, which made Ian incredibly happy. However, their happiness was short-lived when Angela received a threatening anonymous email saying she was not the right person for Ian. Angela was taken aback by the message and initially suspected it might be from her ex-boyfriend, Jason Rayburn, with whom she had a tumultuous relationship before marrying Ian. However, something didn't add up. She had cut off all contact with Jason after their breakup, so he doesn't know about her new relationship with Ian. It wasn't until Ian brought up the topic of the condo, which was purchased by his ex, Michelle, that Angela realized Michelle might be the one sending the messages. As time passed, Angela received more emails from different accounts. The emails all contained similar information but were worded differently. Intrigued, Angela responded to one of the messages, asking the sender to reveal their identity. To her surprise, the sender claimed to be Michelle Hadley. Angela demanded that Michelle stop contacting her, but the emails continued. The tone of the subsequent emails escalated, leaving Angela feeling threatened and fearful for her life. Afterward, she decided not to take any chances and sought a restraining order against Michelle. The incident took place on June 1, 2016. Angela stated to the police that an email from Michelle had left her feeling fearful and anxious. She expressed concern about leaving her home due to the threatening content of the emails, and she feared being attacked or killed if did so. In response to the severity of the situation, the court granted a restraining order against Michelle. A short time later, in June 2016, Michelle seemed to have moved past the troubles of her previous relationship. One evening, after meeting a friend, she returned home to find a team of police officers waiting for her in her driveway. Michelle was taken aback but cooperated peacefully with the officers and was taken in for questioning regarding a restraining charge. During the interrogation, Michelle denied knowing Angela or sending the threatening emails mentioned by the officers. She claimed she was being framed, citing 2 alerts she received a week earlier. The first was from Google, stating her email account had been shut down. The second was from Microsoft, stating her primary email was being used as a recovery email from multiple unknown email addresses. Michelle reported this suspicious activity to the Anaheim Police Department, suspecting her ex-husband of impersonating her. However, her concerns were dismissed by the police, who believed Michelle was lying. As a result, a restraining order was issued against Michelle, but she was unaware that this was just the start of a more complex situation. Things took a dark turn after Michelle was served with a restraining order. However, things became more intense. Angela soon receiving emails responding to a Craigslist ad that she hadn't posted herself. The disturbing ads described a sexual coercion fantasy and included intimate details about Angela's life. The emails contained her phone number, condo address, and even the breed of her dog. It was clear that someone had created an account in her name, but what was particularly unsettling was how they had access to such precise information. Ian and Michelle were the only ones who knew Angela's condo address. She suspected Michelle, but thought that was unlikely. Fear had taken over her so much that she didn't even want to leave her house. The thought of someone knowing her address and watching her all the time made her extremely uneasy. Not knowing who was behind it made her feel even more scared. On June 24, 2016, just days after posting the Craigslist ad, Angela was attacked, and her life was put in danger. Bruises covered her neck, her clothes were torn, and she had a severe head injury from being slammed into a wall. Despite her condition, Angela quickly called 911. When the police arrived, they questioned her about the assault, and Angela revealed that Michelle was her attacker. This time, the police decided to take stronger action against Michelle. They believed that a restraining order would not be enough to protect Angela, and they made the decision to arrest Michelle. While Michelle was in jail, she managed to contact her parents, who are conservative. Her parents were determined to handle the situation discreetly. They posted Michelle's bail of $10,000, made possible by their financial stability as successful business owners. Angela started receiving harassing emails after the incidents. Interestingly, the emails she received came from Michelle's personal email address. However, it's unclear if Michelle actually sent them. On July 13th, Angela contacted 911 because she saw a strange man outside her condo. When the police arrived, the man claimed he was responding to a Craigslist ad posted under Angela's name that featured explicit content. Further investigation led the police to discover that the ad was created from an account linked to Michelle. This raised questions about Michelle's potential involvement and whether she may have provided false information to the police. On the other hand, it's possible that someone was using Michelle's name to mislead the authorities. The next day, on July 14th, Michelle was arrested again, with bail set at $1 million, an amount her parents couldn't afford to pay. Michelle strongly denied sending the emails and creating the Craigslist ads. Her parents believed her because they knew she wouldn't send threats to anyone. Concerned about the potential consequences, Michelle's parents hired a lawyer, thinking that the person behind the threats could continue to get their daughter arrested. While Michelle was in jail for the second time, the threats and emails aimed at Angela stopped again. For 3 months, everything seemed calm for Angela. Meanwhile, Michelle's parents were trying to figure out who was impersonating their daughter. They gathered their daughter's records, including school and hospital records, to see if they could find any weaknesses in the case against her. This led them to find important evidence. Michelle was in the hospital on the same day the first emails were sent, making it impossible for her to have sent them herself. Michelle's parents were given new hope when they received an update about her situation. They had been trying to track down the source of the emails they were receiving, which had encrypted IP addresses. To do this, Michelle's father downloaded various software programs to help identify the senders. Then, in a surprising turn of events, her parents received a phone call with some unexpected news: Michelle's bail had been posted. The surprising twist was that the person who posted the $1 million bail was Ian, the same person who had been treating Michelle badly. This took place on September 30, 2016, when Ian presented the police with the bail money. Michelle and her family were stunned by this development and couldn't understand why Ian would do such a thing. They had many unanswered questions about his motives. Was he trying to make amends for his past behavior, or was there another reason behind his actions? After Michelle's release on bail, she and her family sought answers. Ian then revealed shocking information, claiming Angela had framed Michelle for sending threatening emails. Angela allegedly used fake email accounts in Michelle's name to send the emails to herself. Angela also posted ads on Craigslist, making it seem like Michelle was responsible. The details in the ads could only have been known by Ian and Angela. Further investigation revealed that Angela's bruises found on June 24, 2016, were self-inflicted. Ian discovered CCTV footage that supported this claim. Ian also uncovered Angela's history of deception. She had been lying since the day they met, and one notable example was her fake pregnancy. Ian found evidence that Angela had bought a fake sonogram of twins on Etsy for $7.50 and a positive pregnancy test kit to support her fabricated story. Angela's motivation to ruin Michelle's life stems from her meeting with Ian in 2015. Ian frequently discussed Michelle and an incident involving a condo. This sparked Angela's curiosity, prompting her to investigate Michelle's past. She discovered that Michelle came from a wealthy background, which led Angela to view her as an opportunity for personal gain. Ian, who was married to Michelle at the time, sought revenge due to a past dispute over the condo's mortgage. The incident had left him feeling bitter, and he was furious about being forced to pay the mortgage following Michelle's countersuit. Together, Angela and Ian devised a plan to bring Michelle down. Ian shared Michelle's email address with Angela, and they began plotting to frame her and have her arrested. In an effort to conceal their scheme, Angela and Ian created separate email addresses to communicate with each other. They also opened 6 fake email accounts in Michelle's name using virtual private networks, VPNs. This is the reason Michelle noticed Google alerts about email addresses in her name that she had not created. Unbeknownst to Michelle, Angela was behind these suspicious activities. When Michelle got a restraining order against, she still felt it wasn't enough, because she wanted Michelle gone forever. Angela devised a plan to escalate the situation further. She created a fake Craigslist profile in Michelle's name, posting an ad that invited men to engage in a sex act at Michelle's home. However, the flaws in the plan led to Ian, Angela's husband, confessing the truth. Once the truth came to light, the police secured a search warrant for Angela's devices. To their amazement, when they checked Angela's belongings, they discovered that everything Ian said was true. A total of 21 threatening emails were discovered, with most being sent from Angela and Ian's residence. Further investigation of the emails revealed that some were sent from Arizona. It was ultimately discovered that Angela had visited her father in Arizona during the same period the emails were sent. After discovering these shocking evidence, investigators decided to look into Angela's past. They soon found that she had committed similar crimes before. In 2013, Angela had faked her identity in a serious illness while dating Jason Rayburn, a California state trooper. Angela claimed to be an attorney and said she had cervical cancer. However, her story didn't add up, and Jason became suspicious. He dug deeper and made a disturbing discovery. Angela had lied about having cancer and being a lawyer. This ended her relationship with Jason. The deception wasn't made public until 2019, nearly 3 years later. On January 6, 2019, Angela was detained. She pleaded guilty to 10 felonies, including perjury and false imprisonment. She was sentenced to 5 years in prison. The Orange County District Attorney's Office quickly cleared Michelle's name of the wrongful charges. 3 days later, Michelle's assault and threatening charges were officially dropped. This marked the end of a long and painful ordeal for Michelle. Although the ordeal has ended, Michelle still bears the scars of her wrongful conviction, including the time she spent in jail. She had to give up her MBA classes and lost her job after being wrongfully arrested. After the charges were cleared, Michelle's life began to improve. She earned her MBA and got a good job in marketing at a cosmetics company. She then moved to New York to live with her sister, and her life was better than ever. Ian, on the other hand, separated from Angela and sold their condo for $500,000. However, in 2021, Ian's life took a turn for the worse. He was arrested and charged with planning, carrying out the plot to frame Michelle. As a result, he received a 5-year prison sentence and was convicted of perjury. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Alexandra Morgan. Alexandra Morgan, known as Alexandra to friends and family, is a single mother of 2 children, aged 4 and 11. They live in Wilsley Pound, Cranbrook, Kent. Alexandra has lost contact with the children's father and has had to raise them on her own, which has not been easy. According to some sources, she works as a dog groomer. Alexandra is described as a dynamic and ambitious woman who is always looking after her children. She wants her children to have a better life and has worked hard to achieve it. On November 13, 2021, Alexandra met her parents and left her children in their care. She said she was going on a spa holiday with friends for 3 days. However, by November 17, Alexandra had not returned to pick up her children as scheduled. Her parents began to worry because they could not contact Alexandra by phone or text, which was very unusual. After several unsuccessful attempts to find their daughter, they decided to report Alexandra missing to the police. Kent police suspect that Alexandra Morgan's disappearance is related to a crime. They began their investigation by looking into the spa where Alexandra said she was going to go with friends. The police also wanted to identify these friends. Start an investigation. Police have obtained video footage from a gas station in Cranbrook where Alexandra was last seen. They are trying to locate her by looking for her white Mini Cooper. On the morning of November 14th, Alexandra went to the gas station to fill up, made a few purchases, and then left. The video shows nothing unusual. Rose McCauley, the petrol station manager who has known Alexandra for 17 years, was there when Alexandra bought £10 worth of petrol, a cup of coffee and a snack on the morning she went missing. Rose said that no one knew what had happened to her or where she had gone. Rose continued that a friend and she had searched all over Hastings, but Alexandra was nowhere to be seen. She said that Alexandra wasn't shy, so she didn't think Alexandra was scared to go home. Rose just hoped nothing bad had happened and that Alexandra would get back safely. It was worrying, she added. When Alexandra arrived that Sunday morning, she was very well dressed, with more makeup than usual, her hair done and some eye-catching clothes. She arrived earlier than usual, looking happy and smiling. Alexandra's friends mentioned that in 2018, she shared on social media about being stalked by a stalker. In 2019, she posted a photo with the caption, "Hello Stalker," and included a message asking the stalker to stop following her page. A police spokesman said that it was unusual for Alexandra to have not contacted her family and that they were treating it as a possible murder. As the investigation continued, they were appealing for anyone who might have seen Alexandra or her white Mini Cooper with a black top to contact them. He added that even if people were not sure what they saw, they should report any suspicious information. Alexandra was described as a woman approximately 168 centimeters tall, of slim build, with shoulder-length brown hair. She was last seen wearing a knee-length green quilted jacket, a black top underneath, ripped blue jeans, knee-high black boots, and a silver necklace. Usually, when someone goes missing, they don't leave any traces behind to help the police investigate. Many missing cases remain unsolved. However, Alexandra Morgan's case is different. She left behind the last digital traces that helped the police find clues to her fate. Not only that, these traces also revealed some shocking secrets. Further investigation helped the police find out more information about Alexandra. She wanted to improve her finances, so she started working as a call girl and advertised her services online, without telling her family and friends. Women in this profession are among the most vulnerable. Everyone knows that they face risks, because it is impossible to know in advance whether the next customer is normal or dangerous. This job is unsafe. According to the investigation, Alexandra had an appointment with a regular customer before she went missing. The police have arrested this man. On November 25, 2021, they arrested a 40-year-old man, Mark Brown, from St. Leonards-on-Sea on suspicion of murder. Mark Brown, a construction worker who is married with a son. His family were completely unaware of his secret life. Sussex police said that before Alexandra went missing, she had met Mark several times, and he had even bought her a Mini Cooper. Their first meeting took place on June 8, 2021, after Mark spotted her on an adult website. They met at her home in Sissinghurst, near Cranbrook, Kent. Things went well, and they continued to meet occasionally after that. The second meeting took place on June 21, nearly 2 weeks later. This time, Alexandra went to Little Bridge Farm near Hastings, Kent, a property Mark rented to meet women and for other purposes. They met 7 more times in August and September. Alexandra did not realize she was falling into a trap. On October 23, 2021, Mark sent her a text message asking if she would like to engage in a risk-free business transaction. He made an offer that involved £100,000 for 35 days at a hotel he would protect, a new ID, a straight car, and money for shopping. Mark asked her to do some simple tasks: go out for a smoke, pack the money, and buy a few things. After receiving this offer, Alexandra did some online research, which showed that she wanted to improve her children's lives. She learned about the minimum deposit for buying a house in 2021. Alexandra also intended to use the money to start a business. She searched for information such as profits from opening a sunbed shop in the UK and taxes to pay on £100,000. These actions showed Alexandra's character and desire to improve her life. Alexandra lied to her parents that she was going to the spa with friends, but in fact she was planning to meet Mark at the farm. On the morning of November 14th, she left home and was recorded on CCTV buying petrol in Cranbrook at 7:20 a.m. She arrived at Little Bridge Farm at around 8 a.m. 3 days later, on November 17th, Mark drove Alexandra's car to Holmhurst Lane, St. Leonards, after replacing the real number plates with fake ones. The following day, November 18th, Alexandra's mother reported her daughter to the police because she had not picked her up and had stopped communicating. On November 23rd, police discovered CCTV footage of Alexandra's car following Mark's Jaguar to Little Bridge Farm. Kent police sealed off the entrance to the farm and interviewed Mark. He admitted meeting Alexandra but claimed she had left after 45 minutes. Mark agreed to allow police to take his fingerprints and DNA. 2 days later, on November 25th, police arrested Mark as the prime suspect in Alexandra Morgan's disappearance. Before we get into what happened to Alexandra, we need to go back to when she met Mark Brown. At that time, Mark had a wife named Leah Ware. She was 33, and she was a mother of 3 who does not have custody of her children. Leah first met Mark on March 25, 2018, through a prostitution website where she advertised her services. A few years later, this same website is where Mark met Alexandra Morgan. In late 2018, Mark and Leah began a relationship and moved into an apartment together. After 6 months, when their lease expired, Leah moved into a shipping container at Mark's Little Bridge farm. Mark describes their relationship as a roller coaster of ups and downs. Leah has had a complicated life. She received weekly benefits, which were usually administered by Mark. She had a history of drug use and mental illness, but many said she was trying to improve herself in order to gain custody of her children. Mark and Leah were in a 3-year relationship before Leah mysteriously disappeared in May 2021. On the evening of May 5th and early morning of May 6th, Leah was with Jack Tyler, a friend and convicted drug dealer. They used drugs together and had an intimate relationship that night. This was the last time anyone saw Leah. The last call from her phone was made at 8:55 a.m. on May 7th. Police believe Leah died that day. On June 8, 2021, Mark met Alexandra for the first time at her home. The meeting went well and Alexandra found Mark to be a reasonable and generous man. However, she did not know that just a month earlier, Leah, who had been in a relationship with Mark, had disappeared without a trace. During the investigation, detectives discovered important text messages from Mark. He sent them to his ex-girlfriend from high school 5 days after meeting Alexandra Morgan. However, the content of the messages had nothing to do with Alexandra and were about Leah. The message reads, "I'll try to be careful. This happened recently. It's a nasty thing to get rid of. Just an old oil drum, 5 liters of diesel, and everything is gone. It burns so hot, it almost glows white. My actions are heartbreaking. It's ironic that a psychopath has a conscience. Investigators suspect Alexandra Morgan is dead and may not be Mark's only victim. Sussex police are appealing to the public for help in locating Leah or her body, as well as any information relating to her disappearance." After arresting Mark on November 25, 2021, police searched his farm and found a container that showed signs of having been recently burned. Inside the container, experts found bone and tooth remains. Tests confirmed that these were those of Alexandra Morgan. In a joint statement, Kent and Sussex police expressed their condolences to Alexandra and Leah's families. They confirmed that Alexandra's remains had been found, but Leah's remains have not yet been found. The investigation is ongoing and police are appealing for anyone with information. Police describe Leah as a white woman, 168 centimeters tall, of slim build, with very long black hair and blue eyes. She had 3 tattoos, a dragon on her right leg, Chinese characters on her right hip, and a fairy sitting on a flower with the name Ryan on her right leg. The search of Mark's house lasted about a month and ended on January 7, 2022. During the investigation, police discovered the skeleton of a Pomeranian dog at the bottom of the pond, with a heavy object tied to its neck. Investigators believe this was Leah's dog, which Mark threw into the pond after killing Leah. On February 1, 2022, police charged Mark with the murder of Leah Ware, although they did not find her remains. Mark had previously been charged with the murder of Alexandra Morgan. Mark initially denied all charges. However, when police presented evidence of him burning Alexandra Morgan's body, Mark admitted to Alexandra's death, but maintained that it was an accident. Mark Brown's trial began on October 17, 2022. During the trial, new information about the 2 cases was revealed. The jury heard that after Leah Ware went missing on May 7, 2021, Mark regularly used her new bank card to withdraw money from her account each week. The bank card was sent to the address of his sister Cheryl. In July 2021, the jury was informed that Mark had twice withdrawn £200 from Leah Ware's account shortly after transferring £200 into his own. When asked why, Mark explained that he could have used her £200 and then paid it back, as at that point, someone owed him £430, so he could have paid it back. Prosecuting attorney Duncan Atkinson asked if it was a coincidence that Leah had died after getting a new bank card. A surprised Mark replied that he didn't understand what Duncan meant and that, as far as he knew, Leah was still alive. Duncan continued by asking if Mark was trying to take Ms. Leah's money and pointed out that Leah was in a place where money didn't mean anything. Mark was confused and said he didn't understand what Duncan was talking about at all, adding that it sounded like they were talking about two different people. During the trial for Alexandra Morton's death, Mark maintained that it was an accident. He explained that Alexandra slipped and fell on a piece of equipment in the workshop he rented at Little Bridge Farm, causing her to hit her head. When he rushed to her, he found Alexandra bleeding profusely. He grabbed a towel to try to stop the bleeding. But when he lifted her head to put the towel under, more blood came out. Prosecuting attorney Duncan Atkinson objected to the defendant's testimony, stating that when the defendant first saw the victim lying on her back on the ground, there was a lot of blood around her head. This clearly showed that she was seriously injured and needed immediate help, especially medical attention. This was obvious before the defendant did anything else. Mark replied that he was panicking and his first reaction was to grab a towel to stop the bleeding. After performing CPR and checking for breathing by holding a mirror to Alexandra Morgan's mouth and nose, Mark confirmed that she was dead. Over the next 5 minutes, he did 3 things. He used his sweater to block the blood, he went outside to vomit, and he retrieved his phone to call 911. He explained that he then decided to cover up the whole thing by wrapping Alexandra in a sleeping bag and wrapping a towel around her head to stop the bleeding. He questioned how he could prove it was an accident and admitted that the decision to cover it up was stupid and the worst mistake of his life. Mark then decided to dispose of Alexandra's body using an incinerator he had built from an old oil drum earlier that year and which he had often used to burn rubbish. "I had heard stories about burning dead bodies," he said, "and I didn't want anyone to stumble upon a body lying around." Mark therefore maintained that he had nothing to do with Leah Ware's disappearance and believed she was still alive, while Alexandra's death was assumed an accident. At the trial, the court heard testimony from Mark's boss, Alan, who said that Mark had warned him that the police might come to arrest him. This conversation took place on November 24th. When Alan asked why the police might arrest him, Mark replied, "For double murder." This answer was significant because Mark implicitly admitted that Leah Ware was dead and that Alexandra Morgan's death was not an accident. Mark denied those words, claiming he only mentioned a 25-year sentence for one murder, not a double murder. Prosecutor Duncan asked about the murder, and Mark admitted his feelings about Alexandra's case made him act as he did, despite his inability to prove his innocence. The jury also heard that Mark had deliberately smeared Alexandra and Leah reputations, as the prosecutor put it, to create a false image of the women. What people should remember about Leah and Alexandra is that they were always smiling and happy in life. They both deserve to be remembered by their loved ones for the wonderful qualities they were. On December 1, 2022, a jury of 12 found Mark, 41, guilty on all counts. Judge Nicholas Hilliard said, "This is an extremely serious case and the impact on the victim's family is immeasurable." He announced that Mark would be sentenced to life in prison and that he would have to decide what minimum time Mark should serve, or even whether to grant clemency. The judge stressed that if Mark revealed what he had done to Leah Ware's body, he would take that information into account when sentencing. However, Mark did not take this opportunity. Before the judge delivered his verdict, the court heard from Leah Ware's mother, Rebecca Martin, about the impact the case had had on the family. "Mark continues to cause our family pain by not revealing what happened. Leah lost her life because Mark Brown wanted to satisfy his dark desires," she said. "He controlled and manipulated every aspect of her life. When she was no longer of any value, he abandoned her like a lifeless object." The court also heard from Alexandra Morgan's parents, who said Alexandra was intelligent, energetic, and determined to succeed. Despite the challenges she faced, she overcame them and held out hope for her future and the child she loved dearly. On January 13, 2023, the court sentenced Mark Brown to 2 life terms. He will be eligible for parole after 49 years. Judge Hilliard imposed the sentence in absentia because Mark refused to appear. He said, "No sentence can ever measure the number of lives lost. Nothing can undo the defendant's actions, it cannot. His conscience is not troubled by what he has done." Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Alison Bonilla. Alison Pamela Bonilla Vasquez was born on November 7, 2001, in Cartago, Costa Rica. She is an only child, living with her mother Yendrai Vasquez. In addition to her mother, her grandparents Ramon and Marjorie, and her aunt Samara also helped raise Alison. Alison's father left the family shortly after her birth. He chose to be with another woman who was pregnant. He did not want to play a role in Alison's life. Only once, when he was diagnosed with lung cancer, did he ask to see his daughter, and Yendrai allowed him to. It is worth noting that his second family did not know about Alison's existence. Alison and her mother, Yendrai, had a particularly close relationship. For Alison, Yendrai was not only a mother but also a father. Therefore, Alison often gave her mother gifts on Father's Day. Their relationship went beyond the typical mother-daughter relationship. Alison felt comfortable sharing everything with Yendrai without fear of being misunderstood or judged. Despite not having a father, Alison did not feel lonely or abandoned. She had a large family and enjoyed spending time with them. She also attended church regularly every Sunday. Relatives described Alison as a kind, outgoing, and friendly girl. In photos, she always looked happy, and there was no sign of sadness or longing in her eyes. Alison had always dreamed of becoming a model. She decided to drop out of 8th grade to focus on makeup classes, thinking that combining the two was too difficult. She did not want to waste time on something that would not help her achieve her goals. After that, Alison started looking for a job to help her mother pay the bills but did not receive any responses from the places she applied. This made her very sad. Her mother, Yendrai, realized that her daughter would have difficulty finding a job due to her limited education, so she encouraged Alison to take evening classes. At age 18, Alison enrolled in Liceo Enrique Geyer, a few miles from home. During this time, she completed a pastry course and began practicing. Alison made delicious cakes and desserts that were loved by everyone in the neighborhood. This helped her find a way to make money from her baking talent. Alison had a boyfriend named Harold Sura Solano who lived in Cachi, a district in the province of Cartago, Costa Rica. Usually, Alison stayed home with her mother in the morning, then met Harold, and then went to evening school at 6 o'clock. She often returned home late by bus. The route from the bus stop to her house was dangerous, dark, and deserted. Therefore, Alison always informed her mother of her location, and sometimes her mother picked her up at the bus stop or halfway. On March 4, 2020, Alison went to her mother's nail salon, then visited her classmate Pal for about 15 minutes. They arrived at school at 6 p.m. and separated because they had different classes. Alison arrived at school and waited in an empty classroom for about 15 minutes before realizing that her classes had been canceled for the day. Instead of going home right away, she decided to visit her aunt who lived near the school. However, her aunt was not home. Alison then decided to go to her boyfriend Harold's house. When she arrived, she learned that Harold was at work but would be back soon. Harold's mother invited Alison inside to wait. When Harold returned, the family had dinner together, talking about a variety of topics and discussing future plans. After dinner, Harold excused himself for a moment, saying that he had urgent business to attend to but would be back soon. At 8:15 p.m., Allison left Harold's house without waiting for him to return. This set off a chain of events that would become nationally known. Harold returned home about 5 minutes later and, seeing that Allison had left, texted her to ask where she was and offered to give her a ride home on his bike. Allison replied immediately that she had already arrived at the bus stop. While waiting for the bus, she texted her friend Pa to ask if Pa's cousin could give her a ride home on his bike. However, Pa's cousin refused because his bike was a special type and not suitable for two people. It is unclear why Allison did not ask her boyfriend for help. She may have been angry with him or did not want to bother him. Allison got off the bus at 8:43 p.m. Her house was about a mile away. Feeling anxious and scared, she texted her mother to pick her up. At 8:45 p.m., Allison texted her boyfriend and mother that two suspicious men had gotten out of a car and were following her. She decided to run home to avoid them. The road Allison was on was dangerous, poorly lit, and had few people. There was only one security camera there, which captured a blurry image that could have been Allison. Allison's mother, Yendrai, went to the bridge half a mile from their home to pick up her daughter but did not see her. She tried to stay calm, thinking that Allison might have gone back to the bus stop for safety. However, she did not find her there either. She finally thought that Allison had not seen her and had gone home on her own. When Yendrai returned home, she found that Allison was not there. She immediately called relatives and friends to ask for help in the search. About 30 minutes later, Harold woke up and received a call from his Aunt Samara saying Allison was missing. He tried to contact Yendrai but was unsuccessful. 3 hours later, Yendrai reported Allison missing to the police, and the search began. Luckily, Yendrai had the last photo of Allison in the clothes she was wearing. Police checked several locations, from the bus stop to Allison's house, Kachi Lake, and the nearby hydroelectric dam. On March 5, 2020, police found their first clue, Allison's glasses in the grass about a mile from her house. However, Allison seemed to have disappeared without a trace. 8 days later, they discovered Allison's identification on a coffee plantation. This was surprising because they had checked the area several times before. What was even more suspicious was that her ID was placed in such a conspicuous and clean location. As if someone had intentionally placed it there to mislead the investigation or hide something. 15 days after Allison went missing, Yendrai received a call from Allison's father. Instead of showing concern or offering help, he said that Allison was missing because she was too beautiful. Shocked by these insensitive words, Yendrai immediately hung up the phone, unable to believe what she had just heard. For a long time, the family, police, and volunteers continued to search for Allison. Every Sunday, they hung up posters with her picture. One day, they decided to paint messages on the streets, recreating Allison's journey from the intersection to the bridge, where she was believed to have disappeared. They also put up posters on roadside poles to attract the attention of passers-by. At the same time, the police received an important clue. A man came to the police station and said that he knew Allison and had seen her on the night she disappeared. According to the man, at around 8:30 p.m. On March 4th, he left his home on his motorbike to pick someone up. On the way, he saw Allison and a burgundy two-door BMW parked next to her. He turned around to check on the situation and realized it was his cousin's BMW. He was 100% sure of this because the car had distinctive bright yellow headlights. Another witness also confirmed to the police that he had seen the same BMW near where Allison went missing that evening. The car belonged to Nelson Sanchez Urania, 28, nicknamed Sukia. Locals called him that because they believed he was a member of a gang in the area. In fact, Nelson and Allison knew each other. Their families had been acquainted for a long time and had lived in the same neighborhood for a while. However, according to Allison's mother, they had only interacted with Nelson a few times. It was just a normal neighborly relationship, not a close friendship. One day, Nelson offered to give Allison and her cousins a ride home. She agreed because it was morning, she was not alone. And she thought Nelson was a good person. On March 2, 2020, 2 days before Allison went missing, Nelson contacted her via Facebook. He sent a message asking Allison to answer some questions. On her cousin's advice, Allison agreed to answer them. Next, Nelson asked Allison about her feelings for him. Specifically, he wanted to know if Allison liked him. Allison was confused by Nelson's sudden question, as they were not close and barely knew each other. When Allison asked why, Nelson explained that he did not have a negative opinion of her but wanted to know if she thought badly of him. Allison reassured Nelson that she did not hate him and that everything was normal between them. Nelson thanked her and said goodbye. Police searched Nelson's home and seized his car, cell phone, and computer. Investigators found shocking images of women being abused on his phone. When they inspected the car, they found that it had been thoroughly cleaned with car polish. However, the front driver's seat carpet and trunk carpet had been removed. Police found hair and blood on the trunk lid and sent samples to a lab for analysis. After examining the exterior of the car, police used a police dog to search for traces. The dog detected possible blood on the 2 front seats and in the trunk. To confirm, the police used a luminol test, a chemical that reacts with hemoglobin in the blood. The results showed that there were many blood stains on the car's interior, despite the owner's efforts to remove them with cleaning products. While waiting for the results from the lab, Nelson remained free but was closely monitored by the police. They monitored his every move to prevent him from leaving the city or the country. Although Yendrai repeatedly requested his arrest, the police did not have enough evidence to do so. Therefore, Nelson continued to live freely without being prosecuted for many months. Yendrai believed that Allison had been kidnapped for ransom. She tried to stay calm and hoped that her daughter was still alive. In preparation for Allison's return, Yendrai kept her daughter's room as it was, not cleaning or rearranging the furniture. She even bought Allison a gift. Yendrai told the press, "I will continue to do so. As long as there is no evidence that she is dead, I still believe that my daughter is alive and will return home." Laboratory test results confirmed that the hair and blood found in Nelson's car belonged to Allison. The police immediately arrested Nelson. Later, his ex-girlfriend told the police that Nelson had never physically abused her but had put a lot of mental pressure on their relationship. Specifically, he forbade her from contacting her friends and using the internet. According to her, Nelson only wanted to have a sexual relationship with her. His previous boss revealed that he was very irresponsible at work and even stole about $11,000. Additionally, his landlord said an ex-girlfriend had broken up with him because she was tired of paying his debts. She described him as a very spoiled man. After that, Nelson confessed to his crimes against Allison. He said that on the night of Allison's disappearance, he found her walking alone on a deserted road. Taking advantage of the late hour and their acquaintance, Nelson offered to give Allison a ride. She agreed and got into the car without suspicion. However, instead of taking her home, Nelson drove to a remote coffee plantation and forced Allison out of the car. Nelson violently attacked her, knocking off her glasses and leaving her nearly unconscious. He dragged her to a nearby abandoned house, where he raped and brutally beat her. Nelson then tied her hands with cloth and duct tape to the front seat of his car. Finally, he stuffed her into the trunk of the car and drove to a dumpster in San Giorano Caci. There, the killer pushed Allison off a cliff into a pile of trash below. He justified his heinous actions by saying that he was under the influence of drugs. He also admitted that he had long been obsessed with Allison, and when he saw her that night, he decided it was his chance to carry out his dark intentions. Surprisingly, Nelson later recanted his initial statement, accusing the police of coercing him into confessing. However, the authorities had enough evidence to charge him despite his denials. The suspect could face a maximum sentence of 35 years in prison. In the early morning of September 4th, a search party went to the San Ano landfill to look for Allison's body. However, because the area was large and difficult to access, finding Allison's remains was an extremely difficult task. Moreover, it had been 6 months since Allison went missing. Just 25 days after Allison confessed, the police discovered a number of important pieces of evidence. They found human bone fragments, including a spine, ribs, part of the pelvis, and a femur. They also found pieces of clothing that Allison was wearing on the day she disappeared, along with a pair of sneakers with studs inside. All of these clues were sent for testing and thorough analysis by the police. José Francisco Herrera, the suspect's defense attorney, questioned the authenticity of the evidence because it was found by volunteers, not professional police. He also said that the discovery of the remains coincided with the time his client declared his innocence, which was suspicious. Rodrigo Era, the attorney representing Allison's family, on the other hand, criticized the suspect's change of testimony, saying that it undermined the credibility of the official investigation. On October 5, 2020, experts confirmed that the remains found belonged to Allison. Because only a partial body was found, they were unable to determine the exact cause of death. However, examination of the remains revealed multiple fractures that appeared after death, suggesting she may have fallen from a great height. Her clothes were torn and her sneakers had bite marks, suggesting a possible animal attack. This would explain why the remains were found scattered in different areas of the landfill. Allison's mother, Yendrai, is furious with the police for not listening and acting promptly. She believes that if they had arrested Nelson sooner, he would have confessed and Allison's body would have been found in better condition. This is an irreparable loss for the family. Despite the terrible pain she is enduring, Yendrai finds some solace in saying, "My daughter is in a better place now, where no one can hurt her anymore." The trial of Nelson took place on July 19, 2021. Harold, Allison's boyfriend, was a key witness in the case. According to Harold's testimony, on the afternoon of March 4, 2020, at approximately 6:30 p.m., he returned home and found Allison there with her mother. Harold then left for approximately 5 to 10 minutes. When he returned, he discovered that Allison had left without saying anything. While Allison was on her way home, Harold texted her repeatedly. As soon as she got off the bus, Allison texted Harold to say that 2 men were following her. Concerned for her safety, Harold suggested that she take a taxi and promised to pay for it. However, Allison refused twice and said that she would run home. Harold did not receive any further response from Allison after that text message. According to his explanation, he only informed his mother of the situation. He did not contact Allison's mother, Yendrai, because his phone battery died. He then fell asleep for about 30 minutes. It was Allison's aunt who called him to inform him that his girlfriend was missing. Since then, he said he has been worried and tried to call Allison several times, but all the calls went to voicemail. He also could not be reached via WhatsApp messages. Harold said he joined the search party for a few days but then had to stop because he felt unwell and had to go to work. He really wished things had gone differently. If he could go back in time, he would have taken Allison home that night. However, unfortunately, what happened cannot be changed. On August 18, 2021, the court sentenced Nelson to 18 years in prison for taking the life of Allison. He could have received twice the sentence, but the judge pointed out that there was no evidence to confirm that Nelson knew the route and time Allison would return home and that he planned to attack her. Furthermore, due to the condition of Allison's remains, there was no evidence that Nelson forced her to have sex. The story does not end there. Allison's family was not satisfied with the original sentence, arguing that it was not commensurate with the crime. In 2022, they successfully appealed, and the court decided to retry the case. As a result, on September 28, 2023, Nelson was sentenced to 35 years in prison. Allison's family's lawyer emphasized that Nelson acted in a cruel and inhumane manner and took advantage of the trust of the victim and her relatives. The court ruled that Nelson's actions were intentional. Nelson used his long-standing relationship with Allison to commit the crime. The criminal court also took into account Nelson's lack of remorse for his actions. Although still hurt and angry, the victim's family was relieved by the new verdict. The decision ended a painful chapter in their lives that lasted more than 3 years and put an end to this nightmare. Allison's family created a memorial at the spot where her body was found. They placed a cross, flowers, and a small altar with a photo of Allison and a statue of the Virgin Mary. Allison's case has caused a stir in Costa Rican media and social media. It has also led to many marches in memory of Allison and other women who have been victims of similar violence. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Eva Blanco. Eva Blanco was born on February 17, 1981, in Spain. Her father is Manuel Blanco, and her mother is Olga Puig. In 1997, the Eva family moved to Algete, a small city near Madrid. They chose this place to enjoy a peaceful life, away from the hustle and bustle of the capital. Of the 3 sisters Eva, Rebecca, and Maria, Eva is known as the quietest girl when she is with her close friends and relatives. However, Eva always radiates as a cheerful, trustworthy, and wonderful companion. She is also very active in sports activities, and this passion brings Eva endless joy and happiness. At school, she is admired by many people for her charm and warm, friendly personality. Eva is a good example for her younger sisters and is a responsible girl. She always followed all the rules set by her parents, including the curfew, so that they did not have to worry or be upset. However, on fateful day, things did not go as planned. On the afternoon of April 19th, Eva and her friends were playing tennis, enjoying the carefree moments of youth. They had no idea that this seemingly normal afternoon would soon turn dark and sad. On Saturday evening, as the sun set, they decided to go to a local disco to enjoy their strong friendship and spend time together until late at night. Eva asked her mother for permission to come home later than usual. Olga, seeing that her daughter was always responsible, agreed to let Eva stay until midnight before going home. It was late at night, and the clock struck 11:30. One by one, the group said goodbye to each other and returned home, including Eva. Little did she know that her journey home would lead to dangerous mysteries. Eva and her friend decided to take a shortcut through a vacant lot to get home faster. It was a route she had taken many times before, but fate had other plans for her. At 11:45 p.m., they parted ways, and Eva began walking through the familiar dark vacant lot. As midnight approached, Eva's mother became worried that her daughter had not returned home. She contacted Eva's friends for information, but they said they had broken up and that Eva was supposed to be home by then. This made her even more worried. She decided to alert her husband, a tow truck driver, who soon began searching for Eva in town. They were joined in the search by their nephew, a local police officer, and the father of one of Eva's friends. At 1 a.m., Eva's parents reported their daughter missing to the local civil police station. However, they were disappointed by the lack of interest shown by the police, who took just over an hour to file a missing persons report. The police downplayed the seriousness of the situation, suggesting that children Eva's age were often on drugs and that she might be lying in a doorway or on the sidewalk. This clearly implied that they were not taking the search for her seriously. During the night, Eva's father visited the local civil police station 15 times. He was extremely frustrated and criticized the agency for not quickly organizing a search for Eva. He accused the civil police of neglecting their duties. However, the police denied this and explained that according to normal procedure, they would wait several hours before starting a search for a missing person. Meanwhile, Eva's father was still worried and hoping that his daughter would return safely. However, the real reason behind this delay remains unclear, adding to the uncertainty and despair. The search for Eva began at 2:30 a.m. Family, friends, and authorities searched the town and surrounding area. However, the police did not file a missing persons report until 8 a.m. By noon, Eva's family had contacted local television station Telemadrid, asking them to report on the incident. At 9 a.m., Eva's body was discovered by two elderly people, 6 kilometers from the town of Algete, near a road construction site connecting Cobina and Belvis de Jarama. This area is often chosen by young couples for private rendezvous in their cars. Initially, the discoverers suspected a serious traffic accident, thinking that she had been run over. However, when the police arrived, they discovered a much more horrifying truth. Eva had been brutally murdered, lying face down on the ground with multiple stab wounds. She was wearing jeans, a dark sweater and hiking boots, the same clothes she had worn on the day of her disappearance. A sleeve of her jacket was missing, indicating a violent struggle. Investigators believe both Eva and her killer arrived at the scene by car. However, heavy rain overnight washed away tire tracks and other vital forensic evidence. Despite the difficulties, investigators discovered Eva's faint footprints and a crucial clue, the footprints of a man wearing size 42 moccasins. The findings offered hope for justice for the innocent victim. The Eva family was notified by the police of the discovery of Eva's body. According to the autopsy report, Eva was stabbed 19 times in the back and died of blood loss at around 4 a.m. The weapon was a navaja knife 8 to 10 centimeters long and 1 centimeter wide. Eva's death was a heartbreaking tragedy for the community. The attack began while the victim was still in the car and continued as she tried to escape up the side of the road. The wounds, especially to the ear and the back of the head, showed the brutal nature of the crime. The first wound was severe enough to cause death. Forensic evidence showed that the victim was also sexually assaulted. DNA samples from the same attacker were found on the victim's body and clothes, proving this barbaric crime. The discovery of a red cloth in the victim's mouth was determined to be from a regular car seat cover. This suggests that Eva was taken into the car after being kidnapped. This detail reflects the painful final moments of the innocent victim. However, since the body was found fully clothed and there were no obvious signs of violence, investigators and police initially thought it might have been a consensual sexual encounter that led to a deadly fight. Eva's parents believe that their daughter was kidnapped, raped and murdered to cover up the evidence. They do not agree with the view that Eva committed suicide. The police expect the case to be solved quickly. They suspect that an acquaintance of Eva's offered to drive her and took her to a secluded place, a popular spot for couples, where the tragedy occurred. Police initially suspected Eva's ex-boyfriend in Fuente El Saz, but he was cleared after questioning. The investigation then focused on men known to Eva's family, specifically people she might have trusted enough to take a ride with. Nevertheless, as the case became more complex, police could not dismiss the possibility that the perpetrator was a complete stranger. But Eva's friends were adamant that she would never take a ride with a stranger and believed that she had been forced into the car. Adding to the mystery, some neighbors linked the incident to an unknown blue car that was seen in town around midnight following another girl. The driver was described as a blonde man in his 20s. Unfortunately, no one recorded the license plate number, leaving a vital clue in the case untraceable. During the investigation, investigators discovered unidentified male bodily fluids on Eva's body and clothing. However, this information was kept secret and not disclosed to Eva's family or the public. Simultaneously, the police secretly collected DNA samples from men who were related to or knew Eva to compare with the DNA found in the fluids. Eva's father's, Manuel, DNA was taken from a cigarette he had smoked while drinking coffee and discussing the case with the police. Other samples were discreetly collected from alcohol tests or from cups used by the suspect in a bar. Although no matches were found, the Civil Defense Police still believe that the perpetrator is an adult male living in Algiers or the surrounding areas. The investigation continues while Eva's family yearns to find out the truth. 8 months after Eva died in a tragic incident, her mother found 2 secret diaries in her daughter's room. The diaries were dated 1995 to 1996 and 1996 to 1997, in which Eva recorded details of her daily life up until the day she was murdered. Most of the entries revolved around Eva and her ex-boyfriend Miguel. Their names were repeatedly written in different colors of ink throughout the pages. Near the end of the book, Miguel's name was suddenly replaced by the number 343110, while Eva's name remained the same. Despite many attempts to decipher the meaning of this number, no one has found a satisfactory explanation. The true meaning of the number remains a mystery, leaving Eva's family and investigators haunted by this puzzling clue. After Manuel's DNA was ruled out as that of a suspect, he launched a campaign calling on Algiers residents to voluntarily provide DNA samples to help with the investigation. With the mayor's support, in November 1999 an official notice was issued asking all males over the age of 16, about 5,000 people, to provide hair or saliva samples. However, Spanish judicial authorities rejected the proposal, considering it naive, inappropriate, and useless. Additionally, it could stigmatize those who refuse to provide DNA, a legal right without a court order. They also believed that the perpetrator would not voluntarily provide his DNA sample. Eva's father collected 2013 DNA samples from residents of Algiers and surrounding towns and sent them to the local court for a decision. The judge requested an opinion from the Madrid chief prosecutor on the legality of the testing. On March 30, 2000, chief prosecutor stressed that only those suspected in the investigation should be tested, not all volunteers. Consequently, only 45 samples were tested, including 12 from Eva's relatives, acquaintances, and the people with criminal records, especially cases involving sexual crimes and knife violence. Time passed and the case went cold. But the turning point of the case occurred when a woman reported to the authorities that she saw a suspicious man at the construction site around 8 a.m., before Eva's body was found. The man was sloppily dressed, walking in the rain without an umbrella, looking as if he had been up all night, and appeared to be searching for something before getting into a white Renault 18. Police considered her testimony credible, as several other witnesses had also reported seeing the Renault 18 years ago, matching the fibers found on Eva's body. On October 28, 2013, police released a sketch of the suspect, made with the cooperation of a new witness. The man was described in 1997 as being about 35 to 40 years old, 170 to 180 centimeters tall, weighing 75 to 80 kilograms, obese, with short brown hair, a square face and hard features, and deep-set eyes. He was wearing a white shirt, a V-neck sweater, and was driving a white Renault 18 with red upholstery. A secret telephone number and email address were set up to collect information, receiving 100 emails by January 1, 2014. In late 2013, the investigation took a major step forward when DNA from the fluid suggested the suspect was of North African origin. Police asked 300 North African men who had lived in Algiers in 1997 to volunteer their DNA samples. A former neighbor of Eva's, now living in the south of France, had a close match to the killer, suggesting the DNA in question could belong to the neighbor's sibling. Subsequent DNA analysis revealed a man named Ahmed Chell. On October 1, 2015, Ahmed was arrested outside his workplace in Vizel-Sung, France, in a joint operation by the civil police and the French gendarmerie. Ahmed Chell was born on March 1, 1963 in Taza, Morocco. He married a 20-year-old Spanish woman in 1989 in Madrid and became a Spanish citizen in the 1990s. They had one child and Eva was 5 months pregnant when Ahmed's wife was murdered. They were not registered residents in Algiers because they lived in the truck of Ahmed's employer, where he worked as a delivery man, about 4 kilometers from the scene of the crime. In 1999, the Chells moved to France, where they separated amicably but were still listed as married in Spain. In 2003, Ahmed remarried a young Moroccan woman who lived near the Swiss border and had children. He worked as a welder on agricultural machinery but struggled with relationships with his colleagues. When confronted with DNA evidence, Ahmed claimed that 2 unidentified men had taken him to Eva's body and forced him to touch her. However, his ex-wife denied this, telling reporters that Ahmed had actually gone out with his brothers, as they often did on weekends. She revealed that one of the brothers had said he had been at the same club as Eva and had spoken to her after she had a fight with her ex-boyfriend. Eva returned to the club at 11 p.m. with friends instead of her brothers. Ahmed's ex-wife said that she and her brothers had not been questioned by the police. She denied that Ahmed was abusive but admitted he was aggressive when drunk. Female colleagues and clients found Ahmed unapproachable, aggressive when drunk, and unsuitable for women. Eva's family had little contact with Ahmed's brother and had not met Ahmed. On October 5, 2015, Ahmed attempted suicide but failed, after which he agreed to be deported to Spain for trial. At a hearing on October 13, he remained silent but provided DNA. He was detained until DNA testing confirmed his involvement. In January 2016, the prison psychiatric unit removed Ahmed's anti-suicide measures. Ahmed claimed he had been forced to touch Eva, denied any penetration, but could not explain why his bodily fluids were present in her genital area. On January 29, 2016, Ahmed was found dead in his cell, having committed suicide by hanging himself with his shoelaces. The trial officially ended on February 15, 2016. Eva's family, despite finding their daughter's killer, were disappointed that he was not held accountable for his brutal actions. However, they believe that justice will be served in the afterlife. Eva's story is a journey to find justice after loss. The community unites to find answers for the young girl whose life was taken. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Jennifer Schuett. Jennifer Schuett was an 8-year-old girl who had just finished school for the day. She lived with her single mother, Elaine, who worked hard to ensure that her daughter was happy and well taken care of. Elaine juggled multiple jobs to support their family and give Jennifer a joyful childhood. With all the love and attention she received, Jennifer grew into a bright and cheerful child, showing a strong enthusiasm for learning and a natural curiosity at such a young age. Jennifer mentioned that children often fear the dark, and she was no different. She admitted that she was afraid of the dark and often slept in the same room as her mother. She recalled that from what she could remember about her childhood, she just didn't like the dark or sleeping alone, and so she felt comforted by going to bed with her mom. She stated that it was just the two of them, and they relied on each other. That night, on August 9, 2009, Jennifer and her mother, Elaine, shared a room. Jennifer was restless, tossing and turning and occasionally kicking her mom, which made it hard for Elaine to fall asleep. At 2:30 a.m., Elaine woke up and asked Jennifer to return to her own room since she had to get up early for work. In response, Jennifer said, "Mom, I love you, so I'm going to sleep in my own room tonight," and went back to her room. Elaine would later deeply regret this decision, but at that moment, she had no way of knowing what would happen next. The next morning, Elaine found that Jennifer was missing when she went to wake her up. She saw that the window facing the parking lot was wide open. Elaine quickly called 911. When the police arrived, she explained that she hadn't heard any sounds or screams after Jennifer went to her room. It's important to note that their apartment was on the first floor, and Jennifer's windows overlooked the parking lot. This made Elaine worry that someone might have seen Jennifer and entered her room through the window. Elaine understood that their apartment wasn't the best place for her and her young daughter, but it was all they could afford at that time. However, Elaine's parents stepped in to assist her and their granddaughter by buying a small house nearby and renovating it. Jennifer and her mother were set to move into the new house in a few months. The day before Jennifer went missing, they had been working in the garden there, where Jennifer had been bitten by mosquitoes, making it difficult for her to sleep peacefully that night. After her daughter went missing, Elaine was heartbroken. She expressed that Jennifer was her only child and begged for her safe return. The police dedicated themselves to finding her. Fortunately, Elaine received news sooner than expected. Later that day, around 6:30 p.m., the police got a call from parents whose children were playing in a field and discovered something alarming. To their shock, they realized it was a young girl. When the police arrived at the scene, they found 8-year-old Jennifer Schuett's body in the middle of the field, 5 kilometers from her home. Jennifer was in a serious condition, but she was still breathing. She had a deep cut across her throat. The most life-threatening injury was this wound, which led to significant blood loss and left her very pale and weak. She was rushed to the hospital in critical condition, where doctors worked hard to save her life. One doctor recalled that when he first saw Jennifer in the emergency room, she was a fairly small 8-year-old, very pale, and covered with ant bites and scratches on her back. He mentioned that she couldn't make any sounds because of the injury to her neck. Fortunately, he added that after the operation, Jennifer's condition stabilized and the bleeding stopped. He stated that they had completed her surgery, her airway was stable, and she wasn't bleeding, so they were very hopeful about her survival. When she regained consciousness after the surgery, her behavior underwent a sudden change. It turned out that she was afraid of all men. She later recounted that she had been kind of a hard patient to deal with because she had a lot of male doctors, and she was scared of males. Additionally, the Dickinson Police Department deployed a whole team to guard her hospital room. Throughout this time, Jennifer was in a constant state of panic. She even hit a doctor in the stomach when he tried to approach her. Elaine tried to comfort her daughter by explaining that everyone present was there to help her. Despite this, Jennifer remained distrustful of those around her. Her behavior became clearer when she disclosed what had happened to her that night. An investigator noted that they knew they had a survivor who couldn't speak and that the challenge was getting information from her. After all, she was only 8 years old, so it was tough. Because Jennifer was too scared to speak directly to the investigator, the detectives provided her with a notebook and pens. They asked her to write down her answers to their questions. Jennifer communicated through notes to her mother, who then relayed the note to the officer. Surprisingly, her written responses were very detailed and accurately described the events. Despite her young age, Jennifer demonstrated impressive intelligence. According to the note, that night, Jennifer entered her room, turned on the light, and picked up a book to read, hoping it would make her sleepy. It worked, and she soon fell asleep. Suddenly, she woke up to find the stranger carrying her out of the house. She said that he was running with her down the sidewalk and that she tried to scream, but he covered her nose and mouth. Afterward, he put her in a car and identified himself as an undercover police officer. Immediately, Jennifer felt that something was off, as she noticed her mother's car in the parking lot, which left her puzzled about their destination. While she understood that police are generally trusted, her mother had always warned her not to trust strangers. Jennifer recalled that as a child, she had wanted to believe the stranger, but the lessons she had learned about strangers in school, along with her fear of the dark, told her that something was seriously wrong. When they passed her grandparents' house, Jennifer suggested that he could drop her off there, but he replied that he couldn't because they were not home. At that moment, she realized that he was lying since their car was parked in the driveway. The man had stopped near Jennifer's school, which was about 3 kilometers from her house. He had told her to watch the moon closely and said that when it changed color, her mother would arrive to pick her up. Jennifer recalled waiting anxiously for her mother's headlights, but they never appeared. At that moment, she sensed that the man was mentally preparing himself for his true intentions. After 5 minutes, the stranger remarked that her mom wasn't coming, so they needed to go farther. He then drove a few more blocks to a dead-end street and stopped the car. Jennifer once again sought confirmation that he was a genuine policeman. She mentioned that she was questioning him and needed him to prove he was an officer. She asked him where his gun and badge were. He responded that his gun was in the back seat of the car. As Jennifer turned to look for it, the suspicious officer removed her underwear. Jennifer lost track of time while in the stranger's grip because she passed out. She only became aware of her surroundings again when he was pulling her by her ankles through the field. Despite the intense pain caused by twigs and stones pressing into her back, she acted as if she were dead and remained silent, knowing that this was her opportunity to survive. He eventually released her feet and left her alone in the field. Jennifer heard him walking away, followed by the sound of his car door slamming and the engine starting as he drove off. She realized that she couldn't scream and didn't understand why. She managed to place her right hand on her neck and felt a deep wound. Looking at her hand, she saw it covered in blood. Since the exact time of her disappearance was unknown, it was thought that she lay in the field for 12 to 14 hours. As the sun set, she noticed the lights of passing cars nearby. She heard children's voices and a dog that approached her several times, seemingly trying to get its owner's attention, but the owner never came. During this time, she was bitten by fire ants, which helped her stay awake. Jennifer stated that every time she regained consciousness, she was shocked that she was still alive. She said she wasn't afraid and had accepted that she might not survive. Suddenly, she heard children's voices nearby, and then something hit her leg. When Jennifer next regained consciousness, she heard a police officer saying, "You've been found. You're going to be okay. Just please stay with me." She remembered being loaded into the life flight helicopter. This experience was very difficult for young Jennifer because she couldn't speak and had to communicate by writing everything down. Her fear of men added to the tension, so her mother asked the questions, and Jennifer's responses were passed on to the officers outside the door. Remarkably, 8-year-old Jennifer was able to get the stranger's name. "I just remember recalling his name, so I wrote that he said his name was Dennis. I remember thinking he looked greasy and that he might have had a scar or something on his face." For days after Jennifer went missing, the police enlisted the help of forensic expert Lois Gibson. She communicated with Jennifer using gestures and notes. Despite these difficulties, they created a detailed composite sketch of a man, which was released to the public in hopes of receiving information. While this was happening, police searched the crime scene and discovered Jennifer's clothing about half a mile away, along with a man's shirt and underwear. Unfortunately, DNA testing on the clothing did not yield any matches to a suspect. Jennifer's recovery took time, but she demonstrated incredible strength for someone her age. There was a particularly tough moment when she became upset over a chocolate bar she couldn't eat, screamed in frustration, and made a faint sound. Doctors were surprised because her vocal cords had been nearly severed, and they didn't expect them to heal, yet they started to recover. Soon after, Jennifer was released from the hospital. She returned home and resumed her studies. After finishing school and college, she chose to become a children's librarian. However, she never forgot the traumatic events of that night. Every day felt like a search for her attacker. She wondered if he could be anyone around her. Could it be our new neighbor? Someone at the post office or the grocery store? Is he watching us? Will he come back to finish what he started? Fortunately, Jennifer met a man named Jonathan, and for the first time in years, she felt she could trust someone. They fell in love. Meanwhile, the investigation into her attacker stalled. The chances of finding him diminished as time passed, and the case remained unresolved, moving from one investigator to another without progress. 18 years after that dreadful night, Jennifer received a phone call. She learned that Detective Tim Cromie would be taking over her case and that he wanted to meet with her. Tim Cromie promised to do everything possible to catch the criminal, and Jennifer believed him. He told her that he would do whatever he could in his power until the end of his career to get her the answers she needed for the case. Tim decided to involve FBI Special Agent Richard Renison in the case. Richard had previously worked for the Dickinson, Texas Police Department before joining the FBI. Together, Tim and Richard uncovered a significant amount of evidence collected on the day Jennifer went missing and shortly after she was found. Key pieces of evidence included Jennifer's underwear, as well as the perpetrator's shirt and underwear. They sent a DNA sample found on these items to the lab in Quantico, Virginia. While detectives recognized that DNA analysis technology had improved significantly over the past 19 years, they also knew that the age of the case would make it less of a priority in the lab. Investigating cold cases often comes with the challenge of time, as witnesses forget, people move away, and some may even pass away. However, one advantage of this case's age was the advancements in DNA technology that could aid their investigation. A year later, their efforts were finally recognized. The man whose DNA was discovered at the crime scene was Dennis Earl Bradford, the same name that Jennifer had identified years earlier. Remarkably, the 8-year-old girl had been extremely precise in her descriptions. Despite being on pain medication, unable to speak, and only 8 years old, she wrote down the name Dennis. This was a significant indication of her accuracy. In fact, it later became clear just how precise she was about many details. Dennis Bradford, now 39, lived in North Little Rock, Arkansas, and his DNA had been entered into the national database after he assaulted a woman in a bar in 1996. He was sentenced to 12 years in prison but only served 4. On February 4, 2000, he was conditionally released, and less than a year later, he was arrested for driving under the influence, just half a mile from his home. He remarried and worked as a welder until his arrest in 2009. Tim Cromie and Richard Renison looked into the connection between a suspect from North Little Rock, Arkansas, and Dickinson, Texas, a small town. They discovered that the man had been arrested in Dickinson in 1987, 3 years before Jennifer's attack. At that time, he had 2 addresses located within 2 miles of Jennifer and Elaine's apartment. To verify that he was the kidnapper, detectives requested a 19-year-old photo from his driver's license. When they saw the photo, they were shocked because it resembled the composite sketch made with input from 8-year-old Jennifer. One detective asked if Dennis had ever heard the name Jennifer Shuett, to which he replied affirmatively. The detective then inquired if Dennis had ever had the occasion to come into contact with her, and the suspect again confirmed this. When asked to elaborate, Dennis hesitated, stating that it was a lot to explain, but he believed that if the detective were to see her, he would be extremely proud of her. Finally, and the suspect stated that Jennifer was alive, repeating that she was alive. The detective reacted with disbelief, exclaiming, "Oh God." The suspect responded by saying that the detective had no idea how hard he had prayed for that, mentioning that he was a believer in Christ but had no idea about her status. He added that it was just about 2 days later when he ran away and took off. Dennis Earl Bradford was arrested on October 19, 2009. He claimed he didn't know Jennifer, couldn't remember why he had stopped near her apartment, and didn't understand why he had acted so cruelly towards her. Bradford also shared a significant detail that investigators were unaware of. After the attack, he felt intense guilt. He wanted to pull the trigger but ultimately changed his mind. Following this, he was admitted to a psychiatric ward, which was the same hospital where Jennifer was still receiving treatment at that time. He had been very close to her at that time. Immediately after the interrogation, detectives informed Jennifer that the criminal they had been searching for 19 years had been arrested. Jennifer expressed that when they called her that morning and told her that they had really arrested Dennis Bradford, it was the most moment of her life and meant everything to her. She conveyed her gratitude to the detectives for fulfilling their promise and, above all, wanted to thank Detective Tim Cromie from the Dickinson Police Department and Special Agent Richard Renison from the FBI for all their hard work and dedication over the last year and a half. She emphasized that their promise from day one, never giving up on her case and hearing her voice while seeing her determination, meant a lot to her. Jennifer also admitted her anticipation of facing Dennis Bradford in the courtroom since he was willing to plead guilty and not drag out the trial. Jennifer was given the opportunity to select the court date and chose August 10, the 20th anniversary of the attack. She mentioned that she remembered staying up late, endless nights, trying to perfect her victim impact statement, writing, erasing, and writing again, just trying to perfect what she wanted to say. She said that she had 19 years worth of things to say to that person. However, it was not meant to happen. On May 10, 2010, a few months before the trial, Dennis hung in his jail cell, which made her feel that her right to see the case through to the end had been taken away. Jennifer went to Dennis's grave and read aloud what she wanted to say in court, stating that Dennis Bradford had chosen the wrong little 8-year-old girl to try and murder because for 19 years, she had thought of him every single day and had helped in searching for him. She expressed that in her heart, she knew he was out there, and now she realized that by listening to her heart all those years and never giving up on finding him, she had been right. After finishing her speech, Jennifer turned to her husband and wondered if Dennis had hurt her. At that moment, a fiery ant bit her leg, and she took it as a sign from God that he had heard her loud and clear. Jennifer reflected on her experiences, mentioning that despite the horrific events caused by Dennis's actions, she faced yet another challenge in her life. She explained that as a result of the trauma, she almost lost the ability to conceive a child. However, she noted that amidst the darkness, there were shining examples of kindness, particularly from Dr. Craig Witz, who, after hearing her story, generously offered his services to her twice, free of charge. She shared that at the end of 2012, she and her partner welcomed their daughter Jenna and later their son Jonah, expressing her disbelief by saying that it felt like a dream and questioning who would have thought that they would really be her happy ending. The criminal tried to silence her and take away her right to be a mother, but he failed. Jennifer desires for her story to be shared, not for her own sake, but for others who have endured similar ordeals and must cope with them every day. She mentioned that they have gone through something in life that they can talk about, and she believes it is worth sharing it with others to instill hope. She expressed her hope that this would inspire others to use their voice to help someone else. Jennifer also added that, in the end, she is not a victim but instead victorious. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Tracy Hallett and J.B. Beasley. J.B. Beasley was born on July 31, 1981, in Troy, Alabama, to Cheryl and Hilton Lanier J.B. After her parents divorced in 1984, J.B. moved to Dothan with her mother. Her mother later married Joey Begun, who became J.B.'s loving stepfather, and she and her 4 sisters grew up in a house in Dothan. She was an outgoing girl who enjoyed a variety of activities, including cheerleading, dance lessons, playing the piano, and swimming. JB and her sisters also modeled for several companies. During high school, she met Tracy Howlett, with whom she quickly formed a close friendship. Tracy was born on March 3, 1982, to Carolyn and Robert Howlett, a police officer with the Dothan Police Department. Her life took a dramatic turn when her father died when Tracy was 5 years old. Her mother then married Mike Roberts, who raised Tracy with her mother. Unlike her friend JB, Tracy was shy but always put others before herself. As the eldest in the family, she took her responsibilities very seriously, especially when it came to her two younger brothers. Tracy attended Northview High School, excelling in her studies and participating in extracurricular activities as a cheerleader, often with JB. As the two girls began to enter adulthood, they had no idea of the tragic fate that awaited them. On July 31, 1999, JB and Tracy set off from Dothan in JB's 1993 Mazda 929 to attend a birthday party in Headland, a town just a few miles north. However, unfamiliar with the roads, the two young women soon found themselves in trouble. Just minutes after starting their journey from home, they became lost. At approximately 10:30 p.m., JB and Tracy stopped at a BP gas station in Headland to ask for directions. The gas station was located near the intersection of routes 173 and 431. Using the pay phone at the gas station, they called their friends to get a better idea of how to get to the party. However, after driving on, JB and Tracy found themselves in Ozark, Alabama, about 24 miles northwest of Headland, instead of their intended destination. Still confused about the directions, the girls stopped at the Big Little store at 11:30 p.m. Although the store was closed, they used the pay phone to make another call. This time, Tracy called her mother to tell them they were lost in Ozark and planning to return home. A woman, Marilyn Merritt, and her daughters then stopped at a gas station to buy a soda. Tracy and JB approached them and asked for directions to Dothan. Marilyn explained the route as best she could, and the girls seemed to understand. She found the girls polite and well-mannered and noted that their car was clean. Marilyn recalled that the girls left the parking lot and turned right, as she had instructed. However, at that time, JB and Tracy had not returned home. The next morning, August 1, 1999, around 8 a.m., Tracy's mother contacted the police to report her daughter missing. Police soon discovered their first clue regarding the girl's disappearance. After Tracy was reported missing, police found JB's car on Herring Avenue in Ozark. What was unusual about the discovery was that the car's gas tank, which had been full the day before, was now nearly empty. The car showed signs of having been driven in muddy conditions, but the doors had been locked, although the driver's side window was partially rolled down. There was no evidence of forced entry. Inside, police found JB's driver's license on the dashboard, as well as the girls' wallets, which still contained cash. However, the car keys were missing, and neither Tracy nor JB were found. A fingerprint on the locked trunk lid led police to believe something was seriously wrong. As they surveyed the scene, they suspected the trunk might contain vital clues but were hampered by the lack of a key. However, after 6 hours of investigation, they found an interior latch that allowed them to open the trunk without a key. When police opened the trunk, they made a horrifying discovery: the bodies of two girls inside. Both victims were fully clothed, but their pants were soiled from the waist down. Each had been shot once in the head. An autopsy revealed that Tracy had been shot in the temple, while JB had been shot in the right cheek. Tracy's body also showed a 9mm shell casing in her leg, scratches on her arm, and spikes stuck in her jeans. JB's clothes, especially her new shoes, were muddy and dirty. Police discovered that the two girls had likely been shot inside the trunk, although initial signs suggested an execution-style killing. After notifying their families of the discovery, an official murder investigation was launched. Police found the girls' wallets, jewelry, money, and credit cards still in the car, indicating that this was not a robbery. Autopsies revealed no alcohol or drugs in the victims' systems. Additionally, the autopsies confirmed that neither girl had been sexually assaulted before her death, ruling out a sexual motive. 2 months after Tracy and JB's murders, the State Crime Lab released a report revealing the presence of unidentified semen on JB's clothing and skin. Despite this new evidence, the fingerprints found on the trunk lid remained a mystery, as there was no match in the database. With no clear leads, the investigation stalled. As news of the girls' deaths spread rapidly, police still had few leads to identify a suspect. A reward was also offered to try to gather information related to the murders, but no new leads were discovered. However, police soon received an unexpected breakthrough in the case. A month after the discovery of JB and Tracy's bodies, Johnny William Barentine, 28, a longtime resident of Ozark, came forward to the local police department on September 1st. Johnny claimed to have witnessed the girls' murders. He testified that on the night of the murders, he had gone out to buy milk for his 2-year-old son around the time Tracy called from the Big Little Store pay phone. At 1 a.m., Johnny returned home visibly upset and initially told his wife that he had been hit by a black truck near Herring Road. However, during a 4-hour interview with Ozark police, Johnny gave 6 different accounts of what he knew. He initially told Ozark Police Chief Tony R. Spivey that he saw a black truck speeding away from the area where the girls' bodies were discovered. Unfortunately, his story continued to change and contradict throughout the interviews. Johnny initially claimed that he picked up a tattooed stranger and drove to the Big Little Store. He later said that the stranger got into a car with 2 girls, whom he recognized as the 2 girls who were later found dead. Johnny said that the group drove to Herring Avenue, where the stranger forced the girls out of the car, leading to a struggle as the girls tried to escape. According to Johnny's statement, after witnessing a confrontation, he saw something in the stranger's hand just before hearing 2 gunshots. Johnny then drove the stranger away from the scene before returning home. However, in a conflicting version of events, Johnny admitted to police that he actually knew the stranger he picked up, identifying him as a neighbor who lived nearby. Notably, Johnny's home was less than a mile from where police discovered the victims' bodies. Johnny's story was not convincing to police, and he became the prime suspect in the murders of JB and Tracy. As a result, Ozark police quickly arrested him and charged him with 2 counts of attempted murder. However, several issues with his testimony raised suspicions. Notably, Johnny did not mention any sexual activity that would explain the presence of semen on JB's clothes and body. Additionally, the neighbor he accused had a solid alibi for the time. Johnny initially confessed to making up the entire story to collect the reward money. Despite his admission, the police believed they had the right suspect. At a preliminary hearing on September 21st, Alabama Bureau of Investigation Special Agent Charles Huggins testified that Johnny accurately described the victim's clothing and other relevant details, indicating that he was indeed present at the crime scene. Then, at a bail hearing on October 18th, Johnny gave another testimony. He proclaimed his innocence, saying that he never picked up a man with a tattoo or witnessed anything on the night of the murder. According to Johnny, he went to the store around 11 p.m. to buy milk for his son and then made up the story to get a reward. The judge denied him bail and he was sent back to the Dale County Jail in Ozark. Throughout this time, Johnny's family members remained supportive of him. They gave interviews to the media, expressing their belief in his innocence and stating that he was incapable of harming anyone. Johnny's attorney, Bill Kimmons, argued that his client had no involvement in the murders of Tracy and JB, emphasizing that the 4-hour interrogation had affected Johnny, who was trapped in his own false confession. Johnny's defense also pointed out that he had only completed 7th grade and part of 8th grade. he said his client was in special education, suggesting he was incapable of planning the heinous crime. After further investigation, it was discovered that Johnny's DNA did not match the semen found on the victim's body and clothing. As a result, he was released from prison on December 17, 1999. In January 2000, a Dale County grand jury chose not to indict Johnny, officially clearing him of any suspects in the murders of Tracy and JB. This development led to a setback in the investigation, with criticism directed at the police methods used and doubts raised about the Ozark Police's ability to handle the case. However, police continued to focus on other potential suspects. During the investigation, a man from Michigan was identified as the prime suspect. He had attended a party the night of the murders near the area and JB's car was later found. The man had left town shortly after the murders, raising suspicion. Police interviewed him 3 times in Michigan but were unable to provide a clear explanation for the 3 to 4-hour gap in his alibi for the night of the murder. However, these statements were never made public by police. The case against him was eventually dropped after DNA evidence proved his innocence. Another key lead police are investigating is the driver of a small white pickup truck that was spotted at the Big Little store. Security footage captured the truck at the gas station when JB and Tracy stopped to call Tracy's mother from a payphone. The video quality was poor and did not show the driver or anyone getting in or out of the truck. It was impossible to follow a digital trail, as there was no record of gas being purchased at the gas station at the time. After releasing photos of the truck to the media, police asked the public for information, but as leads went cold, the driver and truck were never found. The last potential lead was a Mississippi man who had been extradited to Ozark from Jones County on an unrelated charge of possession of drug paraphernalia. The man had stayed with relatives in Ozark for a short time before leaving town 2 days after the murder, prompting police to question him. However, the questioning yielded no significant information and, without evidence, they were forced to release him. A woman contacted police in March 2000, reporting that she had heard screaming and 2 gunshots on the night of July 31, 1999, near Highway 123 South, just inside the city limits. When asked about her delayed report, she explained that she feared being implicated. Police searched the area thoroughly based on her description and found a 9mm bullet, the same caliber used in the murders of Tracy and JB. However, the make of the bullet did not match the brand of the shell casing found on Tracy's body. Furthermore, the bullet had no markings that could be used to forensically compare it to other evidence in the case. Unfortunately, this lead ended up being another dead end for the police. Several leads in the JB and Tracy case eventually ran into dead ends, but police were determined to find a DNA match. As JB and Tracy's grieving families tried to move on with their lives, the case went cold. Years later, however, a dramatic development reignited the investigation. A major breakthrough came in 2015 when Rena, an auxiliary Ozark police officer, came forward and publicly accused an Ozark police officer of killing JB and Tracy and others of covering up the incident. Rena made several serious allegations related to a 1999 incident in Ozark. According to her, a police officer stopped a man named JB on the night of July 31, 1999, looking for cassette tapes containing recordings of conversations. These tapes allegedly implicated Ozark police officers in a cocaine distribution and profiteering scheme. Rena asserted that the search for the tapes ultimately led to the murders of the 2 innocent girls. Rena further alleged that several law enforcement officers knew the identity of the killer but chose to cover it up by destroying evidence. They also allegedly threatened her to keep her from speaking out. She specifically named 3 police officers, Gary Butch Whittington, Rex Tipton, and Eddie Henderson, as harassing and threatening her. Rena further accused then-police Chief Tony Spivey, who led the initial investigation, of being involved in the cover-up. However, she did not reveal the identity of the specific police officer she believed was responsible for the murders. Noted American journalist and newspaper editor John B. Carroll wrote an article discussing the case. John B. believes that the officer involved thought that Tracy and JB would use the tapes as evidence in a trial scheduled for August 2, 1999, just 48 hours after they were killed. However, John B. also claims that Rena was severely beaten with a baseball bat after speaking out, which prevented her from naming the real killer. The officers Rena accused all denied any involvement in the murders of JB and Tracy. Without any physical evidence, none of them were ever officially named as suspects in the case. Regardless, the allegations exploded on numerous true crime websites and social media, leading to a defamation lawsuit. On January 29, 2016, Keith Coffin, Rex Tipton, Tony Spivey, Eddie Henderson, and Gary Butch Whittington, all Ozark, Alabama police officers, filed a defamation of character lawsuit against Rena Crum, John B. Carroll, and Dean Matthews. That case was dismissed in 2018. In May 2016, Rena Crum was convicted of molesting JB's sister and was given a suspended sentence and a $250 fine. Over the years, police investigated multiple theories, interviewed hundreds of people, and took DNA samples from several suspects, but to no avail. It took 20 years and the advancement of new DNA technology before police were able to make an arrest. In March 2019, police sent DNA found on JB's body in clothing to Virginia-based Parabon Nano Laboratories, which specializes in DNA. Using a public genealogical database to analyze the suspect's DNA and match it to genetic information led police to a breakthrough in the case. The new evidence linked DNA found at the crime scene to a suspect named Coley McCraney, a man in his 40s. At the time, Coley was not a suspect in the 1999 murders of J.B. Beasley and Tracy Hallett, but the discovery changed everything. Coley, an Alabama native, had led a relatively normal life before his DNA linked him to the crimes. Born in Alabama, Coley attended and graduated from Carroll High School in Ozark in 1992, where he was an accomplished athlete and served as president of the school's library club. After completing high school, he enlisted in the United States Air Force and served from 1993 to 1997. Coley's personal life involved several marriages. He married his first wife in 1992 but separated 2 years later and eventually divorced. During this time, his ex-wife accused him of assault and filed a complaint with the Air Force. After the divorce, Coley remarried in 2001 and started a family with his second wife. With the exception of a child support issue in 1998, Coley has no prior criminal record or criminal history. Coley spent 20 years as a truck driver for various companies in Alabama. In addition to his trucking career, he recently co-founded a church and served as a bishop. At the time of the murders, Coley was 26 years old and lived on Lisenby Drive in Ozark, about a mile from where J.B. and Tracy's bodies were discovered in 1999. 20 years after the murders, Coley was arrested on March 19, 2019, following a traffic stop in Daleville, Alabama. During an interview with police, Coley claimed that he did not know J.B. and Tracy. Police did not provide any information about his possible motive. Coley's arrest took the Ozark community by surprise, especially Police Chief Marlon Walker, who attended school with him. Rena Crum, 53, who previously accused the Ozark Police Department of covering up the killings, withdrew her charges at a hearing in August 2022. Coley McCraney, 49, is facing 5 counts of attempted murder for the shooting deaths of J.B. Beasley and Tracy Hallett and is being held without bail in the Dale County Jail ahead of his trial, which is scheduled for April 17, 2023. At trial, Coley admitted that he knew J.B. He had a conversation with JB several weeks before the killings in which she introduced herself as Jennifer at the Wiregrass Commons Mall. He testified that on the day of the killings, he and JB had consensual sex in his truck. He said he never knew that Jennifer was JB Beasley. On April 26, 2023, a jury found Coley McCraney guilty on all charges and sentenced him to life in prison without parole. In July 2023, a Dale County District Court judge denied Coley's request for a new trial. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Chad Amelia. Chad Amelia was born in 1992 in Santa Clara, California, USA. His parents, of Irish descent, married young and then moved to the United States. They were eager to pursue the American dream, a common goal for millions. When they arrived in the United States, they found themselves isolated in a foreign country, with no one nearby to support them. Communication with relatives was only possible by phone. Despite the distance, the couple and their children remained determined and did not return to Ireland. Chad grew up with his younger brother Shane. They got along and supported each other from a young age. Following the example of their parents, difficulties shaped their characters, making them kind and fair. Both boys were always ready to help others in need. Chad, the eldest, was especially hardworking. He played baseball and football in high school, and when a coach noticed his talent, he was given a spot on the school team. This opportunity fueled his passion for sports, and he became a talented football player. After graduating from high school, he attended California State University, Chicago, graduating in 2018. Soon after, he joined Camarilla, an accounting firm. At the same time, he continued his studies in economics to improve his accounting skills. Known for being sociable and kind, Chad easily connects with people. One spring day in 2018, 20-year-old Chad was walking his dog in the park when he unexpectedly met Bryn Spetcher, a smart, friendly, and determined 27-year-old girl. Like Chad, Bryn is from Chicago, Illinois. She moved to Washington when she was older, making some changes to pursue her education and find a good job. Bryn was born with hearing problems and was nearly deaf from a young age, forcing her to wear a hearing aid. This made her feel out of place in the educational environment, leading to various challenges. However, it also fueled her desire to help others, as she tried to maintain a positive attitude. Despite the difficulties of moving to California, Bryn earned a degree in audiology, a significant accomplishment that she had long pursued. Her career was just beginning, and she quickly secured a position as an audiologist at a hospital in Los Angeles. She wanted to help others who, like her, faced hearing challenges. Bryn lived in California for about a year but was not sociable and often took time off from work, so she did not have a wide circle of acquaintances, communicating only with a few friends with whom she could spend weekends. Chad changed her life dramatically. They started talking and quickly realized that they had many common interests. Chad was very fond of his smart and attractive girlfriend. He often talked about her to his friends, and he expressed his happiness. She seemed pleased too, eager to share stories about him with her friends. They seemed like the perfect couple, visiting each other often. On May 27, 2018, Bryn went to her boyfriend's house, bringing along her beloved service dog, a husky guide dog. Her boyfriend, Chad, also had a dog, and the two animals got along well. The following weekend, about a month later, Bryn was planning a business trip to another city, so she wanted to spend some time relaxing with her Chad before the trip. And Chad lived in the Tarzana Oaks area of California. That evening, one of Chad's neighbors, a guy named Vinny, returned home around 2 a.m. He spent about half an hour with Chad and Bryn, who were watching their favorite TV series. Vinny then went to sleep in his room, while another neighbor slept, using earplugs and sleeping pills. That night, Bryn and Chad decided to smoke marijuana. In California, marijuana use is legal, having been legalized in 1996. Chad took a few breaths and quickly relaxed. Bryn at first, she didn't feel anything, so she tried again. This time, she felt terrible. Her mind went blank, her vision blurred, and she had trouble breathing. She told her boyfriend, who went into the kitchen to get her some water. She felt so bad that she feared for her life and asked Chad to stay with her. Chad, who had used before, didn't have the same problems and was calm enough to support her. Bryn admits that she thought she was going to die. She began hallucinating about dying in pain and felt like she wouldn't survive the night. She was angry at her boyfriend because he seemed fine and suspected that he was setting her up. In her hallucinations, he became the bad guy who orchestrated her death through drug use. She also heard voices in her head urging her to kill him, and Bryn realized that the only way she could survive was to get rid of her boyfriend. Suddenly, she stood up and went into the kitchen, where she picked up a large knife. Bryn returned to the living room, where Chad was still lying on the couch. She stabbed him multiple times in the chest. At that moment, she heard voices urging her to continue stabbing. She couldn't resist them because she felt out of control. Bryn experienced a fierce cruelty and aggression she had never felt before. The hallucinations continued, and with each stab, she felt relief. Meanwhile, the neighbors were in other rooms on the second floor. One was fast asleep and didn't hear anything. The second neighbor, Vinny, heard some rustling from downstairs, but there was no loud noise or screaming, so he didn't think much of it. Vinny assumed the couple was watching TV. After a while, he heard Chad's voice asking Bryn to leave him alone and call for help. The voice got louder and more frightening, which scared Vinny. To find out what was going on, he started going down from the first floor. When he walked in, the first thing he noticed was the frightened dogs. When he entered the room, he saw the furniture scattered everywhere. In the living room, Bryn had a knife in her hand, covered in blood. Chad lay there, wheezing, his eyes wide with horror as he looked at Vinny. Chad's hand was slashed by her, defenseless, but Bryn, in her frenzy, stabbed him with a kitchen knife. A large gash across his chest that Bryn continued to attack with a look of fury on her face. Vinny yelled at her to stop, but instead, Bryn turned to look at him with a blank expression. She was still holding the knife. Feeling the danger, Vinny quickly went upstairs and knocked on the second neighbor's door to warn him. However, the neighbor was fast asleep and did not respond. So Vinny grabbed his cell phone and ran downstairs. Fearing for his life, he ran out onto the street and quickly called 911. Once outside, Vinny used his phone to call emergency services. His screams attracted the attention of the neighbors, who ran out to see what was going on, making Vinny feel safer. He started banging on the windows and shouting for the girl to stop. The neighbors, seeing the situation inside the house, also started shouting. Everyone was scared and shocked. Meanwhile, inside the apartment, Bryn continued to attack Chad, not paying attention to the commotion outside. Within minutes, the police met Vinny, who was sobbing about the events that were happening. He could only point to the apartment where the violent attack was taking place. The police rushed into the house to intervene. In the living room, they found Bryn repeatedly stabbing a young man in the chest. The room was covered in blood, and although the young man showed no signs of life, Bryn did not stop. The police considered using force to end the attack. However, when ordered to drop the knife, Bryn began stabbing herself in the neck. The police quickly used a stun gun, but it was ineffective. Bryn continued to harm herself, so the police used a baton to disarm her. It took 9 blows to knock the knife out of her hand, even breaking her arm in several places, but she seemed completely unaware of the injuries. Only then did Bryn drop the knife. In addition to stabbing Chad, she also stabbed her dog several times. When other rescue services arrived, everyone was shocked by the horrific scene, which looked like a bloodbath. Doctors tried to resuscitate Vinny, but he was in shock and could not remember or explain what had happened in the house. The experience had a profound effect on him and he needed a long recovery period with the help of psychologists. The dog was treated at a veterinary clinic and eventually recovered from his injuries. Unfortunately, by the time the police arrived, Chad was dead. There was a lot of blood from the stab wound and witnesses to the incident were present. These witnesses were neighbors who had come out of the house when they heard screams. They described what they saw to the police, but could not understand how such a brutal attack could have happened or what had provoked it. Chad had 108 stab wounds, most of them concentrated around the heart and neck. Some of the wounds were superficial and not life-threatening, while others penetrated vital organs. It is difficult to determine which specific wound caused Chad's death. He also had multiple self-defense wounds. Bryn after self-inflicted wounds to her neck. She was rushed to the hospital, where she was placed on a ventilator and intubated. When police tried to communicate with her, they used only a piece of paper and a pen, as she was unable to fully respond because of the life support equipment. Once she was stabilized in the hospital, she was able to communicate fully. Various tests showed traces of mild substances in her blood. Doctors noted that the levels were very low and did not pose a threat to her life or mental health. It is unusual for such a small amount to cause such an extreme reaction. However, doctors did not rule out the possibility that her blood levels had dropped. When Bryn spoke to the police, she claimed that she did not remember anything that had happened. As a result, she did not know where Chad was or what had happened to him. She believed that her injuries may have been caused by an assault with the intent to rape her. In addition to the neck injury, she also suffered a broken neck and a bludgeoned arm, which was how the police safely disarmed her of the knife. However, she did not remember the event either. Bryn could not believe the police account of how she attacked and stabbed her boyfriend. Despite this, she did not seem to feel remorse for her actions toward Chad. Bryn refused to comment further and immediately requested a lawyer, as she considered herself innocent and blamed the incident on the effects of drugs. The last thing she remembered was being discharged from the hospital after 4 days, on May 31st, when she was immediately arrested for Chad's murder. Eventually, she was able to share a more detailed account of the events of that tragic night. Bryn recounted her story. She had gone to visit her boyfriend with a dog and they watched TV together. Around 10:30 p.m., when Chad stepped outside to smoke, she joined him, saying she wanted to try it too. She then began to feel unwell, hallucinating and hearing voices in her head. Bryn had difficulty breathing, felt disoriented and nauseous. She then had a hallucination blaming Chad for her condition. The hallucination urged her to kill Chad, claiming it was the only way to stop her bad feelings. Although she initially resisted, the hallucinations grew stronger. Feeling like she was going to die, Bryn attacked Chad with a knife but insisted that she had no control at the time, claiming she was innocent. When the police arrived, the hallucinations told her to harm herself. She complied with these voices. Bryn insisted that she could not resist because the voices in her head had complete control over her. She could not even drop the knife when the police asked her to, until they broke her arm. Bryn believed that she was suffering from drug-induced psychosis at the time. She was eventually charged with first-degree murder, but she pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. Preliminary hearings took place and her bail was set at $500,000, which she paid, allowing her to await trial at home. During this time, the police continued to investigate and Bryn's attorney repeatedly requested adjournments. And Chad's murder trial was set for October 23, 2023, but a new district attorney took office a month earlier, causing further delays. The trial finally began on November 9, 2023. The new prosecutor reduced her charges to manslaughter, which shocked the victim's family. They could not understand how someone could accidentally stab the victim more than 100 times. Remarkably, all of this took so long that Chad's mother did not live to see the trial and never saw justice. She passed away in 2020. The court psychiatrist concluded that Bryn suffered from a psychotic disorder caused by smoking. This decision was supported by other experts, and according to the prosecution, they did not have enough evidence to refute this conclusion. During the trial, Chad's family insisted that it was a deliberate massacre and demanded punishment. The defense argued that Bryn's behavior showed signs of psychosis. She was not aware of her actions, first stabbing her boyfriend and then hitting him multiple times. A police officer using a stun gun was unable to stop her, and they were only able to take the knife away after breaking her arm with 9 blows from her baton. This behavior showed that she was psychotic. However, according to Bryn, she understood what was happening. She remembered everything and claimed that she saw the murder as the only way to survive. She was aware of her actions and made her own decisions, despite experiencing hallucinations. Her arguments were strongly opposed by her attorneys. As a result, the defense continued to delay the trial, which lasted for 5 years. The main issues in dispute were whether there was intent to kill Chad and whether Bryn used the drug voluntarily. Under California law, a person can be held responsible for such crimes while under the influence of drugs or alcohol if it can be proven that the use was voluntary. If the drug was coerced, the killing is considered unintentional. This must be proven. The prosecution pointed to numerous letters from the girl, in which Bryn repeatedly told friends that she had been drinking. She also mentioned smoking occasionally, suggesting that this was not her first time using. The prosecution argued that on the day Chad was killed, she also used the drug voluntarily, as she had done before. Many colleagues defended Bryn, describing her as a very responsible person. She had no criminal record and no one could testify that she was capable of causing such a psychotic episode. However, this claim seems dubious, given her medical history, which should have made her aware of the potential consequences. She defended herself by saying that she was unsure what drugs her boyfriend had smoked and given her that night and believed he had given them to her intentionally. No other drugs were found in his home. Bryn's parents defended her, claiming that she had no romantic relationship with Chad and that she was acting in self-defense against harassment. They attempted to portray her as a heroine. However, friends on both sides disagreed, saying that Chad and Bryn had been together for nearly 2 months, had an intimate relationship, and that everyone knew about it. Chad's relatives denied any allegations of violence against him. They described him as respectful of women and noted that although he had a smoking habit, which his parents had advised him to quit, it was legal and had never caused any problems. They insisted he was not aggressive, so they did not believe he would attack his girlfriend. Throughout the trial, Bryn showed no remorse for what had happened. The only time she cried was when the brutal details of her arrest were described. She could recall the intense pain of being beaten with a baton. The case was complex, controversial, and attracted considerable public attention. Many were puzzled as to how a seemingly kind-hearted girl, dedicated to helping others, could commit a brutal murder. The jury then deliberated on the verdict. The jury then found Bryn Spejcher, 32, guilty of manslaughter. Bryn showed emotion for the second time during the trial. She covered her face with her hands and sobbed. At that point, she was focused only on her sentence. She did not care that she had caused serious harm to her loved one. Bryn simply did not want to take responsibility for her actions. Chad's father spoke to reporters, expressing his frustration with the justice system's decision, which he considered unfair. He also pointed to inconsistencies in Bryn's testimony. She contradicted herself. For example, She initially described her boyfriend as a nice young man who was easy to talk to. However, when the subject of smoking was brought up, Bryn admitted that she had always been afraid of him and then began to deny that they had a relationship. Chad's father said that Bryn did not want to take responsibility for her terrible actions and tried to blame Chad for the bloody massacre to reduce her sentence. The father could not believe that the court would seriously consider that a person could accidentally inflict more than 100 wounds on another person. His son's death was not simple or painless. Chad had suffered a lot, and now the killer was trying to blame him with lies. During the trial, the prosecution argued that Bryn smoked of her own free will, and Chad had never forced her to take drugs when she did not like them. However, psychiatric experts confirmed that Bryn's psychosis was caused by the drug. This was one of the first cases where a voluntary user was justified in using drugs. And while awaiting the verdict, the girl was released on bail. On January 24, 2024, Bryn Spetscher was sentenced to 2 years of probation in order to complete 100 hours of community service. The judge justified the lenient sentence by stating that Bryn was not in control of his actions during a psychotic episode, making a reduced sentence appropriate. The attorney applauded the court's decision, calling it the right thing to do. However, Chad's father was unhappy with the ruling, arguing that the judge had set a dangerous precedent. He said the decision implied that marijuana users in California were being given a license to kill. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Brianna Nugent. Brianna grew up in Hayden, Alabama, USA. Her friendly personality helped her make many friends. She doesn't care about boys at school. Instead, she devotes herself to her studies with the goal of becoming a nurse. After graduating high school, she enrolled in the nursing program at Wallace Community College. There, she met Stephen Nix, who was known to enjoy drinking and gambling. He was not concerned about having a stable job and often acted irresponsibly. Stephen worked as a cleaner at the medical center where Brianna was interning, and he seemed uninterested in improving his life. Despite their differences, they began dating, and at one point, Brianna moved into his house, where he lived with his parents. However, after a while, Stephen admitted to Brianna that he was having an affair with a coworker. This revelation shocked Brianna, leading her to end the relationship. She then focused on her studies and successfully earned her nursing degree. During the following year, Stephen repeatedly tried to reach out to her, pleading for another chance and promising he would never cheat again. Eventually, Brianna relented and agreed to give him another opportunity. They later got married and both started working to save money for their first home. The problem started when Stephen lost his job as a cleaner. He attempted to find another job but had difficulty maintaining any position for long. After several attempts, he eventually stopped looking for work altogether. His daily routine began to mirror that of a teenager. He spent his nights playing computer games and slept until the evening. Although Brianna had a good income, but Stephen, who was not contributing financially, took control of the family budget. Brianna had to ask him for every dollar she needed for basic necessities, often pleading with him for even essential items and food. However, Stephen didn't control his spending, so he ended up in debt of about $50,000. To address this issue, he persuaded Brianna to declare bankruptcy. At that point, he had such control over her that she felt she couldn't refuse. In 2019, they went through with this plan, and the debts were eliminated, but it took a big toll on Brianna, leaving her morally exhausted. The stress caused by Stephen led her to depression, requiring expensive medications. After a few months, she was offered a life insurance policy at work, which depended on her income as a nurse. When she brought it up to Stephen, he agreed it was a good idea. By February 2020, Stephen was still unemployed and was heavily reliant on Brianna. She started to suspect that he might betray her again and feared he was using illegal drugs. To protect herself, Brianna hid her medications from him, but he continued to control her finances and her life. She felt trapped in a toxic relationship and was unsure how to escape, fearing her parents would judge her for wasting time on someone unworthy. Ultimately, she only confided in a few close friends and her sister, sharing her intention to file for divorce. On March 2, 2020, around noon, Stephen called 911, claiming he found his wife, Brianna, unresponsive in the bathroom. The dispatchers instructed him to perform CPR, but throughout the call, he made no attempt to help his wife. Instead, he focused on telling his version of incident while ignoring their instructions. 5 minutes later, when paramedics arrived, a county sheriff's deputy and some of Stephen's family members were already present. It was unusual that an officer, who was supposed to be half an hour away from the incident, arrived even before the paramedics. The Stephen family lived far away, yet they arrived at his house very quickly. Soon after, Brianna's relatives also arrived. Stephen called his mother and sister at 12:20 p.m. after the ambulance had arrived. He informed them that Brianna had ended her life and said he had witnessed similar things in the past. His family was shocked and rushed to the house. The medics tried to revive Brianna, but it was too late. By the time the ambulance arrived, she was already cold, indicating that she had been dead for several hours. A syringe with an 18mm needle was found nearby, leading to speculation that Brianna may have died from an overdose of illegal drugs. Stephen explained that his wife's body had already cooled down when he found her. He said he was preparing to go outside when he heard a loud noise from the bathroom, which sounded like something had fallen. He dismissed it, thinking it was just mobile phone. After going shopping and returning about an hour later, he went upstairs and found his wife lifeless. Brianna's family rejected the idea that her death was due to an overdose. They frequently communicated with her and did not see any signs of substance abuse. As a nurse, Brianna was subject to random screenings for alcohol and illegal drugs at work, and her results were consistently negative. Her colleagues also expressed disbelief, stating they could not imagine her using anything harmful. When Brianna's relatives arrived, they observed that Stephen appeared calm and not overly concerned about the situation. He was even cleaning the bathroom. However, his demeanor changed dramatically, and he became nervous once police officers arrived. While the police were focused on investigating the crime scene, Stephen took a bag of collected garbage from the bathroom and threw it into his pickup truck instead of the trash bin. When the police requested access to Brianna's mobile phone, Stephen refused. However, her sister was able to unlock the phone and discovered that Stephen's last call to Brianna was made at 7:53, a time when he usually would still be asleep after a night of playing video games. When questioned by the police, Stephen claimed he had called her number just to tease her, but he did not explain the nature of the joke. Additionally, at 12:02, after calling 911, Stephen inexplicably sent a text message to Brianna. He could not explain why he would text someone who had already passed away. He also refused to allow the police to inspect his car. After learning that he had thrown the garbage bag away, the investigator had to return to the station to obtain a warrant. This inadvertently allowed Stephen time to get rid of the evidence. He quickly got rid of the garbage and erased any traces of his actions. The crime scene was thoroughly cleaned by the next day, when Brianna's relatives arrived to gather items for the burial. Brianna's sister was shocked to discover that Brianna didn't even own nice underwear. This seemed odd. It also shows that her husband does not allow her to spend any money on herself. The following day, Stephen called Brianna's sister, Brittany, and invited her to his home for a discussion. When she arrived, his relatives were already there. He showed her 2 empty bottles of opioid painkillers and a bag of syringes. Stephen claimed he found these items in a drawer of Brianna's belongings, suggesting she died from a drug overdose due to a long-standing addiction. However, This medication can only be prescribed by prescription, and it certainly does not belong to Brianna. Brittany was sure that Stephen was lying. After Brianna's death, Brittany and her mother went through Brianna's things and didn't find anything missing. They would have been aware if anything was gone. Then, Stephen showed Brittany another drawer that had Brianna's underwear in it. He claimed to have found more evidence there that Brittany and her mother had overlooked. At that point, Brittany started to think that Stephen might have been involved in Brianna's death, and she no longer wanted to listen to him. Brittany went to the funeral home to style her deceased younger sister's hair and makeup, Brianna, despite strong objections from Stephen's family. Upon arriving, she quickly realized why they were so concerned. She discovered her sister's body covered in numerous fresh bruises and over 80 injection marks, some new and others starting to heal. At the time of her death, Brianna was a certified nurse and knew how to administer injections properly. If she had a secret substance addiction, her level of bruising is also not normal. Additionally, some injection sites were located in where Brianna couldn't have reached herself without assistance. They also found signs of trauma on her palms, resembling defensive wounds. The condition of the needle marks indicated they were inflicted about 8 to 12 hours before her death. The nature of some injuries suggested that someone had restrained Brianna while administering the injections. This case cannot be considered end your own life, and it feels like the police are against Brianna. Brittany was able to take several photos of the Brianna body before being removed from the funeral home. She collected crucial evidence indicating that Brianna had died a tragic death. Brittany suspected that Brianna's husband, Stephen, was responsible. At Brianna's funeral, Stephen did not speak to anyone or offer any greetings. He attempted to fake tears but ultimately had none, and many attendees noticed he appeared very unnatural. Several witnesses said Stephen bragged about connections that could help him evade justice, he even speaking with a mourner who turned out to be a police officer from another city, but he quickly ended the conversation when he realized this. At that time, no one was aware that the deputy sheriff who arrived at the scene before everyone else was related to Stephen. Brianna's sister discovered that this deputy was not included in the investigation records, despite having full access to the crime scene. In October 2020, an investigator contacted Brianna's family to inform them that she had been the victim of a crime. The investigator suggested that she may have been killed because she witnessed another crime and was killed as an unintended witness. However, this theory was never confirmed, and the investigation was eventually closed. Stephen continued to live in the home he shared with his late wife, Brianna. Just a few days after Brianna's death, Stephen's longtime mistress moved in with him. They even renamed Brianna's favorite dogs. He received $160,000 in life insurance money from Brianna's death. Stephen rarely left the house and continued to live a childish lifestyle, spending the insurance money on video games, pouring concrete in front of the house, buying expensive car parts, and acquiring weapons and gifts for his lover. Stephen showered lover with lavish gifts, including jewelry and ostrich leather boots. However, he was unable to afford a tombstone for Brianna's until 6 months later, and this only happened after her relatives pressured him to do so. Brianna's family was appalled by his actions from the start. They sought justice for her by filing complaints with the police and other authorities, but their efforts were in vain. The case was closed, labeled as an accident, and no investigation was conducted to gather evidence or identify suspects. Brianna's family continued to appeal to higher authorities, requesting that the police reopen the investigation, but they were told it was under the jurisdiction of a different police station. The Brianna's family is concerned that Stephen's connections are obstructing the investigation. Despite this, Brianna's sister remained persistent, and the case was reopened. Unfortunately, it was soon discovered that all the evidence had been lost, and no thorough examinations had been conducted during prior investigations. Stephen is still withholding crucial case information from Brianna's sister and mother. Although he claims that access to the medical report from the pathologist is restricted until an official conclusion is reached, this is misleading. He is aware of the report's contents, raising questions about his motives. Eventually, the Brianna's family hired a private detective who was able to uncover various materials. One significant find was video footage from a search of Stephen's car and home, which showed him smiling brightly while leaning over Brianna's lifeless body. Following the public revelation of this footage, Stephen became fearful and installed security cameras around the house. Meanwhile, Brianna's sister Brittany continues to search for evidence that proves Stephen was involved in her younger sister's death. Brittany sent a photo of a package of fentanyl to Brianna's co-workers, who firmly stated that the medicine package did not come from the hospital, as they had never seen such drugs before. It was later revealed that a different drug from another manufacturer was used at their workplace, which had different packaging. This contradicted Stephen's earlier claim that Brianna had become addicted to drugs at work. Moreover, an official request from a medical institution confirmed that Brianna could not have stolen the drugs, as their records were strictly monitored. The large needles found in Brianna's home were not typically used for such drugs, and Brianna, a nurse, was aware of this. Additionally, Brianna's family received a toxicology report about 4 months after her death. The report revealed that her body contained high levels of various psychotropic substances, including of antidepressants and fentanyl, almost double the lethal dose. The Brianna's family believes that Brianna, given her experience with medications, would not have made such a mistake or acted carelessly. When Brittany spoke to the medical examiner responsible for the autopsy and the cause of death determination, he mentioned that the conclusions in the autopsy report heavily relied on the circumstances surrounding the death. They reviewed reports from investigative agencies like the sheriff's office and the coroner's office. Brianna's death certificate states that the immediate cause of death was an overdose, and it categorizes her death as an accident. However, achieving justice remains difficult. The Brianna's family initiated a petition to raise public awareness, which could have helped with legal and social expenses. Unfortunately, they only raised $5,000 instead of the needed $20,000, leaving the majority of the financial burden on Brianna's family. The case is over. Justice has not been served. We will follow the new details of the case in the future.